Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests and participants from around the world, good morning. It is with great pleasure that we welcome you all to this virtual conference organized by Sharjah Museums Authority under the title, The Role of Digitalizing Collections in Museums and Cultural Institutions Towards the Sustainable Development of Our Communities. Sharjah Museums Authority, SMA, is a government authority that was established under directions of His Highness Sheikh Dr. Sultan bin Mohammed Al Qasimi, Supreme Council Member and ruler of Sharjah. SMA links and oversees 16 museums spread across the Emirate of Sharjah, covering various topics and themes, including archaeology, Islamic art and culture, heritage, science, marine life, and the history of Sharjah and the region. Before we begin, I would like to point out that we have the option of live translation to Arabic language using the interpretation feature down below on the screen. أعزائنا المشاركين، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته وأسعد الله صباحكم بكل خير. أود التنويه بتوفر خيار الترجمة للغة العربية من خلال أيقونة الترجمة أسفل الشاشة. This conference is organized in celebration of the International Museums Day, IMD, which marks the 18th of May of every year. Since 1977, museums around the world would celebrate this day with the objective to raise awareness and shed light on topics of importance to museums. This year's IMD theme, as announced by the International Council of Museums, ICOM, is Museums, Sustainability and Well-Being. Today, we embark together on this virtual journey of knowledge sharing and meaningful discussions. This conference brings together leaders and experts from multiple cultural institutions from different cities. We will shortly present on the screen the agenda for today's conference. The conference will begin with keynote remarks by Her Excellency Manal Ataya, Director General of Sharjah Museums Authority. This will be followed by 3 talk sessions. Our first session for the day is entitled New Platforms and Technologies Used to Digitize Collections and Foster Sustainable Practices in Museums and Cultural Institutions. The session will be moderated by Hazel Ann Page, Collections Management Manager at Sharjah Museums Authority. She will host guest speakers, Professor David Joseph Risley, Professor of Digital Humanities, New York University, Abu Dhabi, along with Nasra Al-Blushi, Planning and Following Up Officer at the National Library and Archive, and Sheikh Al-Mtairi, Head of the National Culture Section at Jum'a Al-Majid Center. Following a 5-minute break, our second session will begin at 11:15 a.m. and it is entitled How Are Different Institutions Digitizing and Archiving Collections of Importance to the Arab Region? The session will be moderated by Ali Al-Khayal, Curator of Sharjah Archaeology Museum. Alia will host guest speakers, Dr. Zaki Aslan, Director of the International Center for the Study of the Preservation and Restoration of Cultural Property, IKRAM Sharjah, Fatin Rushdi, Resource Center Unit Head at Louvre Abu Dhabi, and Samar Tariq Abdurrahim, PMDA Researcher and Archivist at the Palestinian Museum. Our last session for the day will begin at 12:20 p.m. The session will be moderated by Dr. Gokce Okandan, Associate Professor of Design Management at the American University of Sharjah, and it is entitled Engaging Audiences Through Digital Platforms. Our guest speakers for the session are Sheikh Anwar Al-Qasimi, Vice President at Sharjah Art Foundation, and Shammam Sabbah Al-Kitbi, Marketing and Communication Department Manager at Sharjah Museums Authority. This conference is set to conclude at 1:30 p.m. UAE time. Dear participants, I encourage you to take advantage of the useful features of this interactive online platform. Engage in discussions and interact with fellow participants in the chat box, and you can also use the Q&A feature to raise questions for our speakers. My name is Khawla Al-Awadi, and I'm head of Museum Performance Division at Sharjah Museums Authority. Once again, welcome to SMA's conference, The Role of Digitalizing Collections in Museums and Cultural Institutions Towards the Sustainable Development of Our Communities. We will now proceed with keynote remarks by Her Excellency Manal Ataya, Director General of Sharjah Museums Authority. Enjoy this conference.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good morning, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to welcome you all to the Sharjah Conference on Digitizing Practices in Museums and Cultural Institutions towards the sustainable development of our communities. As we celebrate ICOM's International Museum Day, which in this year's edition focuses on sustainability and well-being, it is vital for us with unparalleled opportunities to engage with our audiences and share our collections and stories with the world. We are aware that the use of new platforms and technologies to information is crucial to further create access to cultural heritage to a wide and varied global audience. Yet we pay close attention to sustainable challenges and best practices associated with digital preservation, including the environmental impact of digital storage and the importance of necessary maintenance and updates to ensure the longevity of digital collections. At Sharjah Museums Authority, we are committed to promoting arts and culture, and in doing so, towards achieving sustainable development goals of our community. Our recent augmented reality project at Resistance Monument in Khorfakan is just one example that demonstrates the incredible potential of blending virtual and physical worlds to engage visitors in new ways. Bringing our collections to life in an interactive and immersive experience helps meet the expectations of our visitors. I hope that throughout the 3 sessions in this conference, our esteemed speakers will share with you their projects, programs, and case studies to preserve heritage, enhance visitor experience, foster engagement, and present best practices in digitizing in museums. I hope everyone joining us today will gain insights and practical tools, find opportunities and potential solutions to challenges to help museums and cultural institutions build a more sustainable future. And finally, I would wish to express my gratitude to everyone at SMA who's contributed to the success of Sharjah Museums Authority's digital initiatives and to the team that has organized this conference today. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. I think we will start. Welcome to the first session. We will start this morning with Sheikha Al-Matari, who is the head of the National Culture section of the Juma Al-Majid Center in Dubai. She's actually active in the Emirates Writing Union and is a member of associations of libraries, both in the Emirates and in the UK. So without more ado, I'm very pleased to welcome Sheikha with our first session. Thank you.
Hi Hazel, good morning. Okay, so first of all, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I just would like to thank Sharjah Museum Authority for raising up this important issue. So we'll start with digitizing collections in Juma Al-Majid Center. Okay, so here just a small brief about Juma Al-Majid Center. In 1991, Mr. Juma Al-Majid realized the needs of scholars and researchers, especially those who are unable to obtain the necessary books, references, and manuscripts. So he established a public library. Afterwards, it was developed to become a cultural organization known as Juma Al-Majid Center for Culture and Heritage. Okay, so talking about the collections and services, I guess this is a very important thing because when you really understand your collection and your user, you can just give a very good services to them. So the collections we have now for more than 500,000 books, I mean the published books, and also more than 8,000 journals, I mean the titles, and also around 2,000 20,000 theses and 24,000 original manuscripts and 800,000 manuscript copies. Okay, so we have some services. I mean, a lot of services, but I will focus on these two services. We have the borrowing books and photocopying services. The center systems allows the borrowing of books for internal use only and not for external use. For that purpose, we have the photocopying service, which enables researchers to photocopy the material of books or thesis under some conditions. Okay. Here, if I have some time, I just would like to raise something. Do we really need the digitization? And do we have a clear vision of digitization? Because, let me speak so directly. Do we really need to digitize everything in the world? I mean, in the library or in the museum, or it's just like a trend, so we have to follow all the trends in the world. Here we have to stop and to understand what are our needs and what are the users' needs also, and how many tools do we have so we can also, improving these tools and having something really very good for our user. So I think here we have really to collaborate with other associations, because I think my friend Nasra will speak about AGDA project. So I shouldn't make the same, I shouldn't duplicate the work. So that's why we have to understand each libraries and museums and what do they have and how do they serve their users. Okay, so what was Jum'a Al-Majid Center given this? We established the digital lab or digital laboratory, المختبر الرقمي. So the center has established a digital laboratory in 2001 with the purpose of transforming all kinds of cultural materials into a digital form in order to utilize them through modern technological means. In this laboratory, manuscripts, documents, rare books, and magazines are photocopied, and microfilms, videotapes, and cassette tapes are transformed into modern digital forms. About 40,000 pages are transformed daily from paper form into digital form. Because we have a digital lab inside the center, and we have some labs all over the world. Okay, so here you can see some pictures from the digital lab. How they are working. And also you can read your book at home. So the user can ask for the material, the one without the copyrights. And we can send these materials through the emails or the WhatsApp. So now I think it's so easier for them to read whatever they have, even if they are inside the country or outside. So here, just to show the case, this is a manuscript. Okay, so daily we have like more than 10 users or 15 users from, as I mentioned, from inside or outside the country. They're asking about some manuscripts, especially the rare manuscripts, because you know that they cannot find them in any library. So we are trying to provide them with these these manuscripts and rare books. So we're sending now in yearly, more than 2,500 material all over the world for the researchers. Okay, what are we going to do or to complete? We are working on mobile applications, so you can search, read, do whatever through your phone or through your tab. And also digitizing private libraries and museums collections. We really started this project with some museums inside the country and in some GCC countries, because they have a lot of things like books or materials or the museum materials, so they don't know how to deal with that. So that's why we're trying to do this service for the private libraries and for the private museums also. And we are continuing opening the new digital labs in some countries, because they also have a very huge collections of rare manuscripts and also they don't know how to deal with it. How can they serve these treasures for the new generations? How can they save their information? So we are trying to help them through these projects. And I'm done. Thank you.
Many thanks, Sheikha. Unfortunately, I couldn't see a shared screen. I don't know about other people. Okay. Right. Thank you very much, Sheikha. Certainly, the Juma Al-Majid Centre has been working hard on this for many years, so we're very grateful to all the work you've done. For our second speaker, I'm very happy to welcome Nasra Al-Falouchi, who's the Planning and Follow-up Officer at the National Library and Archives in Abu Dhabi. She's worked in the archive industry for more than 8 years and is currently working on a master's in records and archives management from Sorbonne University in Abu Dhabi. Without further ado, then I welcome Nasra to our session. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to hearing about some of the projects you're doing, and I've certainly used some of the the results of some of the projects that have already been done. Thank you.
Thank you, Hazel, and good morning, everyone. I would like to thank Sharjah Museum Authority for giving me this opportunity to represent the National Library and Archives. Please confirm, is the slide on?
Yes, I can see it this time. Thank you.
I'll be talking about the different platforms and technologies to digitize collections and foster sustainable practices. And especially talking about the National Library and Archives practices and experiences. I will start my presentation by giving a brief about the history of the National Library and Archives. Upon the directives of Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan, the National Library and Archives was established in 1968 under the name of Documents and Research Bureau and was affiliated with Al Diwan Al Amiri, the ruler's court. Its objectives were defined as collecting documents and information relating to the history and culture of the Arabian Peninsula in general and the United Arab Emirates in particular, from primary sources in Arab region and from the foreign countries. It has been entrusted with the documentation and translation of these documents and archival materials. However, in 2021, the National Library and Archives was ranked the 6th most advanced organization in its category worldwide in terms of tools and technologies employed, and that I'll be presenting during my presentation today. So the National Library and Archives has a federal law number 7 for the year 2008. And we also have the National Library, the National Archives bylaw of Federal Law number 7 for the year 2008, as well as we are applied with the International Archives specifications and different standards, as well as we have different policies, procedures, manuals that can help the government entities in managing and handling their archives. And in terms of the digitization, we are following the best practices and the best digitization standards. That is the FADG, the Federal Agency's Digitization Guidelines Initiative. The FADG stands for the Federal Agency's Digitization Guidelines Initiative. It is an initiative in the United States that aims to establish common guidelines and best practices for digitizing cultural heritage materials. So the main goal of FAGI is to ensure that digitized materials meet high quality standards that are preserved for the long term and are accessible to a wide range of users. The FAGI provides detailed technical specifications and recommendations for digitization, addressing factors such as the resolution, the color management, the file formats, for example, TIFF or JPEG, and the quality control procedures. Our main tasks include, So the main tasks of the National Library and Archives, and especially the Archives Department, is to collect different archival materials, either from the government agencies at the UAE, or from the different users and collectors from over the world, and as well as the different institutions worldwide. After collecting, we process these archival materials by the best standards, and we have a huge laboratory in Musaffah area. That is the Conservation and Preservation Center. As well as after conserving the materials, we digitize them, and then we provide them in our internal systems, such as the D2 that preserve documents, and the MMS that is related to multimedia and ignition for the films. Later on, we preserve these archival materials either physically or digitally, or on other new technologies such as the microfilm and pickle film. Finally, after preserving, we provide these archival materials to the users through our halls and through our websites and applications, and we also participate in different exhibitions. So now I'll be talking about the role of digitization in achieving sustainable development in our societies. First, I'll be talking about the digitizing and capturing. Then we'll be talking about the preserving of cultural heritage, advancing research and access, and promoting collaboration. So digitizing and capturing. At the National Library and Archives, we use digital transformation that allows archival institutions to make their collection more widely accessible. In the National Library and Archives, we use the best technologies and the best digitizing equipment, such as the BC100 V-Shape that is used to scan the books. And we also use the auto microfilm scanners, the auto book scanner, and the AA0 scanner that is used to digitize the maps and the large documents, as well as the image access Bookeye. In terms of preserving the cultural heritage, we preserve our cultural heritage for the future generations, and that is through the microfilm that has proved that the archival materials can be kept for as long as 500 years. However, we also use the new technology of pickle, which is similar to the microfilm, but it's more advanced. Like we can preserve archival materials and in different formats, such as the multimedia. Unlike the microfilm, we can't store the multimedia on it. And researchers have proven that the pickle film can last for up to 1,000 years. So in terms of advancing research and access, a great collaboration between the UK National Archives and the National Library and Archives to come up with the AGDA project. It is an agreement that was signed in the UK. After the agreement, we had a contract was established, and there are a lot of ongoing projects between us, including a joint research in the fields of archive. So AGDA is an Arabian Gulf Digital Archives. It is a platform that can help to advance research and understanding of important and different topics related to, for example, here we're searching about sustainability and such as the climate change, the biodiversity, and environmental conservation. So by providing access to relevant historical and cultural information, archival institutions can help researchers and scholars better understand the challenges we face and develop effective solutions. A great example can be the COVID-19 and the 1918 Spanish flu pandemics. So both COVID and the 1918 influenza pandemic similarly caused significant negative impacts on the global economy, affecting international relations and had considerable delays in its diagnosis, treatments, and vaccines. So they had to go back to the Spanish flu pandemic in terms of to be able to manage and to come up with the right vaccines and the right medications to stop the COVID. And in terms of promoting collaboration, the National Library and Archives had a collaboration with New York University in Abu Dhabi, that is the Arabian Collection Online. In terms of promoting collaboration, digital technologies can also help archival institutions collaborate with other institutions and organizations to create a more comprehensive collections and facilitate research and education on important topics. And this can lead to greater cooperation and knowledge sharing across the communities, which can lead to sustainable development as well. And you can go through the Arabian collection. It is a mutual project with the New York University. You can find it on their website, and you can check the books. Now I'll be talking about the emerging technologies, artificial intelligence in the archives and cultural institutions. So in the National Library and Archives, we use the AI recognition, the ABI OCR, and the auto classification through our internal systems. And all of these technologies and new technologies provide us with the best access to the users. And finally, I am thrilled to extend an enthusiastic invitation for you to participate in the upcoming International Council of Archives Congress that will be hosted in Abu Dhabi and for the very first time in the Middle East and in the Arab region. This highly anticipated event promises to be an exceptional gathering of professionals, experts, and everyone interested in the field of archival science from around the globe. I would like to thank you all for listening, and I hope that you enjoyed.
Thank you very much, Nazra. Very interesting overview of what you're doing, and some very useful projects for everyone out there to aid their research and match up with other online resources. So great, thanks. Thank you. Right, so our third speaker for this session, I'm very pleased to welcome Dr. David Risley, who is based at New York, Abu Dhabi, University in Abu Dhabi. He's the Professor of Digital humanities, but has previously worked at the American University in Beirut, and publishes widely on things in French studies, comparative medieval studies, digital literature studies, and on the cultures of the Mediterranean Arab world. So we look forward to hearing his aspect, his point of view or approach to this topic this morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hazel, for the introduction. I'd like to also thank all the organizers. Her Excellency Manal for her introductory remarks, and for all the hard work that went into doing the organizing the conference today. I just want to check to make sure that everyone can actually see my slides. I'm going to open them up in format. I think that everyone sees those, hopefully. Top of my presentation today is seeing objects in a new light, opportunities and challenges of AI in digitized museum collections. So the perspective that I'm going to be speaking from today builds on our previous two speakers, but I'm going to be speaking as a researcher and as a researcher who uses museum collections, and in particular, a user who uses digitized museum collections. So some of the things I'm going to be talking about today, we might think about what could be done a few years out as the collections in different cultural institutions in the UAE are enriched and built. So there we go. So some focal points of my presentation today include the following: that the digitization of museum collections allows for these collections to, number one, be used in different ways inside the museum. Number two, be used outside the museum in new ways. And number three, to be used both on-site and remotely, that is inside and outside in complementary but different ways. I think this is a really important point because we've seen through the pandemic the importance of having not necessarily a perfectly seamless relationship between in-person and virtual participation in society, but a complementary one. And I think that digitization plays a really important role in that. To keep going on the main points of my presentation, digitization also allows, and we've heard this before, collections to be more accessible to wider, even global audiences. Number five, they allow objects in collections to be contextualized and understood in new ways. And this point is very important for me, especially when those collections are turned into data. The sixth point is that a digitization of museum collections allows those collections to be used by many different kinds of people: researchers, creative industries, amateurs, citizens. I could list a lot more people here on the slide. The digitization of museum collections also allows for those collections to circulate in the world with a very high quality and accuracy of copy. So if you make, we know very well that on social media, we have all kinds of material that circulates in really bad quality. If we just do a Google search, for example, for certain items, we can actually find different versions of that same quality. The institutions that digitize and make those collections available have their materials circulating in very high quality in the world. And then finally, I would say that the digitization of museum collections allow more value on a global and local scale for those collections. So digitization of collections is, of course, about preservation in some ways, but it's also a way of those collections being used in different and new ways. And this is the point I'm going to talk about today, including with machine learning and AI. So the talk that I'm going to give today actually brings together a lot of work. I'm what's called a digital humanities professor, a digital humanist, if you like, and we work in teams. We heard in the last talk the importance of collaboration. I just would like to acknowledge some of the people on the screen now who've participated in some of the work that I've done today. This is not the sole professor who's working. So here are some key terms for my presentation. First of all, digitization. So we often hear, and I'm going to contrast that with the idea of digitalization in the second slide. Sometimes people use these terms a bit interchangeably. I'd like to use them separately today because to make the point of my paper. So digitization is the transformation of analog media, so things like text or image or sound or 3D objects, into a digital form. And what that means is that we turn them into some kind of a data representation, of sort of a kind of data, so that they can be used by a computer. That's what digitization is. So we talk about digitized collections. We heard in the previous paper about turning various objects into different versions, into data versions of themselves. The second term here is digitalization, right? It's very often, again, as I said, sometimes confused with digitization, but here I'm going to use the word digitalization for the idea of a digital transformation of a sector, such as museums or education or business, and then use of technology to achieve that sector's goals. So these two things go together, but in many sectors, like say banking nowadays, we don't need digitization very much anymore, right? Everything is what's called born digital. It begins in a digital format, begins as data. Whereas in museums or archives or cultural collections, we have so many things that are not yet data. So the third term for my presentation that's important is digital humanities. This is the field that I work in. It's a field of study that brings together the use of technology with the study of culture and the human record. So what I mean by human record, I mean it's historical things like collections of literature, like ACO or photography or art historical collections, museum collections, in other words. And finally, I'm going to talk about AI or machine learning. It's a term we use all the time, here all the time in society. But what I really mean here is the design of techniques that allow computers to learn and to produce intelligent human-like outputs. So ChatGPT is the latter, right? It produces something of an intelligent output, and machine learning to learn. We're going to see some examples of. So sometimes we hear about digitization and the concept of endangered archives. I don't know if anybody is familiar with this, but the British Library has an endangered archives program, and I'm just going to read the quote on the screen. The Endangered Archives Program facilitates the digitization of archives around the world that are in danger of destruction, neglect, or physical deterioration. This idea of digitization is sort of imagined almost as a one-time process. It's something that we step in to save, right, archives in different parts of the world where we have, say, geopolitical instability or acts of God or war or whatever. This is not, I think, the situation in a country like the UAE, where we benefit from an extraordinary amount of stability and also access to technology and actually the means to do digitization. So what that means, though, is that I think we have to think about digitization not as something that's just stepping in to save, but a whole process of imagining transforming cultural heritage, and maybe doing digitization multiple times in certain situations, but imagine that cultural heritage as it's going to last into the future. So it's a way of shaping the knowledge base of a country and its cultural institutions. So some examples of digitized regional collections might be the following. We have here on the screen, I'm going to start from left to right. Some letters from the QDL, from the Qatar Digital Library, that were digitized by the British Library, that related to the pre-oil period of the Gulf. Next to that is the Ahmed Zaki Abu Shadi collection at New York University Archives and Special Collections. This is a series. This actually particular letter is not an Arabic letter. It's an English letter of Abu Shadi's wife writing to him, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. In the middle at the top, we see some things which maybe you don't strike you as being a form of digitization, but they certainly are for me. These are 3D files that are available on a platform called Thingiverse, for that people can, if you have a 3D printer at home or at work, you can download these files and you can print a little version of the Fahedi port or the Data Roundabout clock tower. On the bottom right, we have the Zaki Nusaybi collection at Akasa of the photography archive at NYU Abu Dhabi, just a few pictures from that. And up on the right-hand corner are just some old cassette tapes, right? That things like the Music and Sound Cultures Project at NYU AD is interested in digitizing. So digitization is, as we heard in the last paper, a very wide spectrum, right, of tasks, from capturing images of text to perhaps scanning something, right, and thinking about its 3D contours, to even capturing pixels in an image or even cassettes. And I'm not going to be able to talk about all these things today, but I would like to give just a few examples of two examples, actually a couple examples of some work that we do once we have a digitized object. Right, so museums and archives are full of handwritten documents. And the problem, of course, with handwritten documents, even when they are digitized, is we can't read them very quickly, right? We can't search in them. We can't find, that is, unless we find a way to do that, to recognize handwriting of human beings. And so some of the work that I've been doing with colleagues, and in particular with Suphan Kurmazaltan at NYU Abu Dhabi, has to do with what's called handwritten text recognition, or HTR, where we take a text like this one's in German, and we actually train an AI to understand the writing there, producing something which is a searchable version of that. On the right-hand side, we see that same letter from Abu Shadi's wife to him from the Savoy Hotel in Boursaid in Egypt. And you can see on the left-hand side, the handwritten version, and on the right-hand side, the decoded, if you like, sort of almost what looks like the typed version. Now, the reason we do this, of course, is that transcribing documents is an extraordinarily labor-intensive task, and AI can really help us in doing that. So we go back to if we go deeper into this question of Abu Shadi's wife's letters, or letters of Abu Shadi's wife to him, what we see is that this process of HTR makes these texts searchable, which is a really great thing to have, right? To have a searchable text, because you can find words, you can find concepts that matter to you, but they're also then manipulable by computers. So for example, we take on the upper right-hand side, you recognize this probably as a word cloud. We've taken about 60 pages of her letters, and we've distilled them down into the most important words. And this is an interesting concept. The word cloud is an interesting thing for sort of identifying what are the most important things, right, that show up. Well, she talks a lot about Sophia, which was one of their daughters, talks a lot about the children, talks a lot about the hotel at which they're staying. This is at a moment when Abu Shadi and his wife are separated. She also writes a lot in the morning, so that's one of her habits. So it's a kind of a summarial version. But when we have this kind of computer readable text, we can also feed it to ChatGPT. And we get some really interesting results. So I fed that same 60 pages to ChatGPT and asked ChatGPT, what's going on in this collection? And one of the things that ChatGPT is really good at is summarization. And so we get things like, well, some important themes include the hotel and accommodation, personal updates, family and friends, education, et cetera, with some other text. Now, if you know the collection very well, this is not very helpful, but let's say you don't know the collection. And I think that in most of our cultural collections, we have so much to deal with that we don't fully understand it well. And so being able to transform into data and to use and reuse is a very, very valuable skill. Just in case you believe that this only works for English, we're working on another text by Abu Shadi, which is called his Safinat al-Hijra, which was a text of him going to America, and he wrote a bunch of things, and you can see that's in progress. What we're doing is we're training it to understand Arabic handwriting, and Arabic handwriting of different sorts, so that we can actually come up with a text like that. So the second kind of image that the second kind of text or object I want to talk about are images. We all have probably lots of family collections of photographs, albums, things like that. These are ways that in the past we've thought about collecting images. But one of the things that I become really interested in doing and working with my students on is thinking about classifying and letting AI deal with images. So if you're familiar with Flickr, the site where people put all kinds of amateur materials on the web, we have someone who goes by the name Albudi 2001. I don't even know him, but who's put up, or her. But I put up all these Arabic magazine covers. There are thousands of them here. And one of the things that I did was I put those into a data mining program called Orange to come up with what's called an image grid. So on the right-hand side, what we're seeing is kind of like the computer trying to make sense of those images and trying to put things into classes or into groupings, right? A way of kind of, and you can actually see some differences. Like there seem to be some images in some places here which have very dark colors, right? Different algorithms are going to classify in different ways. Sometimes you have images that are from the same magazine. It's like the computer, without even knowing that it's the same magazine, puts those images together. So this is another way of thinking about working through that big data, right, if you want to call it, of cultural collections, which could be very interesting. Now, I did this with this is actually an assignment done by 2 students of mine that just turned in their work a couple of days ago, which I really liked. What they did is they took a bunch of Instagram photography from the UAE, in particular from 2 sites, 2 Instagram accounts, one called Gulf of Images, one called The Edge. And they were interested in taking and putting that in the context of larger architecture. So in other words, the question that sits behind this is like, how do people take pictures of the UAE? And what does that remind us of, right, in the deeper history of taking pictures in the world, in the larger picture? Kind of the point that I made about the contextualization of archives is really important here. And so what we get are some interesting things where we actually see that the computer can actually distinguish between different kinds of things like skyscraper landscapes, things like desert landscapes. It looks at places where people try to make the same kind of picture, frame it in a similar way. And then this one, which in the upper right-hand corner, which I find really fascinating, is how the computer begins to make relationships between contemporary photography and old artistic drawing, as if somehow those 2 things, those connections, people have in their minds a way of photographing the city that's very similar to old art. And I think this is a really fascinating. So Yakulia and Sami, thank you for your great work. And finally, oops, I'm just 1 second. Let me try and see if I can get this one reloaded. Okay, I'll skip that one. That what I had was an example of what might happen if we actually worked with some other archives. And so I had an example from the Akasa archive at NYU Abu Dhabi. And what was interesting there is if you put together different kinds of materials, you might be able to distinguish what are the photographs of Sheikh Zayed, what are the photographs of desert landscapes, what are the photographs of airplanes and buildings and modernity in the UAE, and how does a computer help us to understand groupings in those that we might not necessarily see ourselves? So in conclusion, for the question of digitization and access, digitization, for me at least, does not automatically equal access, but it is a necessary condition for access in contemporary digital culture. So in conclusion, I think that we need, as a group of thinkers and as a group of researchers and as a nation in the UAE, we need to think about ways that we can digitize and make collections available for reuse following international best practices. And so here I could think about things like Creative Commons licenses or the International Image Interoperability Framework, which are 2 things which you can go and learn about later if you like. But we also need to think about how various audiences might be interested in those collections, from the professional to the amateur. We need to imagine reuse scenarios, so people doing things like remixing or doing handwritten text recognition like me, or using AI analysis, or maybe even just building little 3D printed replicas that they can put in their house or send to their friends, or files that they can send to their friends that people can print out in other parts of the world. We need to recognize, and I think this is a very important point, when the monetization of reuse, in other words, the money that we might make from reuse, might discourage or encourage reuse. Then this is a tricky one, because the question, digitization is not free, it costs a lot of money. So what is the point of putting these kinds of materials into the world? And why would you maybe ask for some money or not to different communities in order to do that? And the Creative Commons group, I think, has some really interesting solutions for that. And finally, I think that we really need to ask ourselves, we need to be certain whether we want all materials to be open and reused, or if we want a portion of them to be open and reused. And I think that is really a question for a larger debate. So with best practices in digitization and museum collections, the museum sector can enhance collection value. It can digitalize its sector, meaning it can undergo a digital transformation. And I believe participate fully or more fully in a digitally enabled knowledge society. So if you'd like to know a little bit more, my colleagues, 2 of my colleagues I mentioned on the screen, we published an article in the Museums of the MENA Region Journal last year called Creating New Audiences for Digital Objects Through Museum University Collaboration. So I invite you to go check out that article, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, David. Lots of useful things to think about, very interesting points. So far, I haven't got any question and answers there. but I have a few questions too. Okay, just checking chat just in case somebody's put some questions there. I think a big one for use, certainly more maybe professional research users, and maybe then for the general public, is the use of online information, and then the ability to reuse it, or the provisions to reuse it. For example, in museums, we might want to display a copy of an original document, and sometimes that's quite straightforward, and other times it's back to this more complicated issue of monetarization of scanned material that actually is already in the public domain. You can go to, certainly in the UK, the National Archive and the British Library, and you can look at things, the original documents, and you can photograph or digitally record them as well for your personal use and research, which is very useful. But the increasing use of putting this stuff up online as well has made it much easier to gain access without travel, which is great and a bit more sustainable. But sometimes if you want to buy a copy, that creates a brand new copyright, which in itself is expensive, and then it's a limited time you can use that copyright. So some organizations, probably because digitization is very expensive, running costs are expensive, but it actually can become a very expensive process to use some of this information sometimes to reproduce it. If you've got the right software, you can make copies and stitch things together and do it yourself. But if you need to go to some organizations, it can be very expensive, and others actually are not expensive. It just really depends. So David, have you got any comments? And also Nazra, really, and Sharjah, what's the approaches certainly for Nazra and Sharjah, the process if somebody wanted to publish or use copies of your digitization projects in a publication or in a museum display, for example?
Okay, if you allow me to start. Okay, thanks for this question, because really some people, they don't know how to use the benefits in the libraries and the museums. So in Jum'a Majid Center, we are offering all the services for them to help them having their copies of the manuscripts, or for the rare books or thesis or whatever. And we are trying to help them to go in the very right path to use these materials, because sometimes they are using some pictures. For example, in Nasra's issue, they are having like a very huge collections of photocopy or from images. So in books, I mean, especially in the rare books or in the manuscripts, they have to know how to deal with them, because there is no copyrights for the manuscript, especially for the manuscript. So how do they can deal with it? How can they use it for their research? It's so easy. Just come, ask for your copy, and got it, and that's it. Nothing to do. I mean, nothing complicated to do with this.
Thanks, Sharjah. Yes, I think sometimes, although something might well be very old and out of copyright, if you ask, some organizations don't do this and some do. Some will create a new copyright by making a new copy by the digitization process. Others don't, and they're just happy to be acknowledged as an organization when you use that copy.
I think now from through the National Library, we will have some very clear laws, because as you mentioned, Hazel, each library is working as she wants or as she decides, but we don't have a real one very clear law for for dealing with the the informational materials. So I think through the National Library, inshallah, we will have something clear so we can use it safely.
Yeah, it's not just using material from organisations within UA, it's internationally. And within, say, Britain, have taken a lot of resources, different organisations, very, very considerably within one country.
Yes.
Because some need to make more money than others. Yeah. Nazra, would you like to comment?
Yes, in terms of our archival materials, whenever a researcher would like to request archival materials, for example, documents or photographs or films, we don't provide the original. The original is preserved for the long-term preservation. However, we provide a very high resolution photograph, for example, or a document, and it goes through a process where the user or the researcher has to sign a pledge to use and to save the copyrights as well of the photographs and the documents, and to use it legally in legal manners. So, and we have the form available online on our website.
Thank you. I guess it also, you have your original documents, but you will also have copies from other archives, and it's managing their requirements as well as your own requirements.
If I can jump in, Hazel, one of the things I would say is that I think that the question of rights very often derives from print culture, right? And we think about what is the right to reproduce something so that you can put it back into print, right? So if I as a professor write to the British Library and say that I need a copy of one page from an old manuscript and I want that to reproduce that, they will ask me, they'll send me back a form and they'll say, well, how many copies are going to then be remade of this? Like, what is the run of the journal? Are there going to be 5,000 copies or 10,000 copies? Is it a global scale? Is it a local scale? And when we think about, we move beyond that print model and we move to something like an image or sound or even the shape of something, as I evoked with the 3D copies, we're in a completely different domain. It's a very tricky domain, actually. But I think the question that I would say is, that's why one of my points, on my conclusion points, I said that in a place where we're thinking a lot about digitization and beginning a lot of digitization projects now, it's really important to imagine the way that people are using cultural collections in the world, right? So we revert almost to those older ways of thinking through print culture and as a acquired legacy in our minds. But I think it's worth thinking about that. And there's a lot of questions that come up here, right? So I think Creative Commons has really done this very well, which is they say, for example, okay, so say you're not making any money from it. You can reuse it if you're not making any money from it. That's like a particular license that they give. Or you can reproduce it as a researcher and you can modify it for your own purposes. So I don't know, you can draw some lines on it or draw some things to it, or you could come up with a detailed image. In other words, you can do that work yourself, but you can't make any money off it. Or some people put their materials, like many museums of the world, have put their whole digital collections online with zero rights restrictions at all, and just said to society, remix it, make it your own, do something with it. And where they make their money, I believe, is on things like the reuse by other museums, the reuse in documentaries, the reuse in media, the making of T-shirts with the Mona Lisa on it, that kind of thing, right? So there's a shifting of the space of rights that I think that is going on in the world, and I think it's really something that's worthwhile thinking about that, because if you want for the image of Burj Khalifa, right, to be all over the world, or if you want that, one way of doing it is say every time you use it, you have to pay for it. But I wonder if that doesn't discourage people from using it. right? Like if they have to. So for that sector of people who aren't making a lot of money or who are just reproducing, or I don't know, just even on social media or whatever, they probably don't want to fill in a form and get rights to reuse something. And I think the landscape here is a little bit tricky in that respect and can be rethought. Thanks for the question.
Thank you. Yes, it does vary widely, and also, you know, with many temporary exhibitions, some lenders don't want much photography, and it's not necessarily just for conservation point of view. It's so their images don't go out, and others can be completely opposite. Everyone, please take as many pictures of us, you know, you in the gallery without artwork, because it promotes their organization, and you know, maybe more people go and visit them in that country where the collection comes from. So it can vary widely, I think. And I think the charging issue can, because the costs of charging can vary hugely, they can be quite, they can restrict access, even for museums. I mean, I think museums, although we can digitize, we're still in the game of objects and going to see real things. And I think back to a point that Sharjah raised right at the beginning, why are we doing this? And I think when we originally just started by digitizing or copying photographs and documents, it's changed so much with AI. And I think the sort of automatic recognition now can also be used on photographs. So if you've got lots of photographs in collections that you have no idea who they are, with face recognition, you actually might be able to start matching photos up with known images of known people. And I think New Zealand's done this some time ago. And they maybe start identifying people in photographs, which I think could be quite exciting as well.
That also raises a few ethical considerations, right? Because the people whose faces, you know, there are certain countries of the world where that kind of regulation is not allowed, and so it's really a wide, I would say, a very wide international landscape where it's both exciting. I think this is where the AI, particularly as you point out, where AI becomes a really interesting and complicating factor in the way that we imagine the circulation of digital objects.
And I think you know, digitization, 3D imaging, all sorts of things, that it has made lots of information far more accessible. Thinking of archaeological objects, you know, just even a news update, the object's been scanned, well, not scanned, it's been photographed and put into a 3D image, and that can then be rotated so you can see all sides. With other layering, imaging and x-raying and things, it can show different layers on an object that might have been from a buried environment. And then even without conservation, which can be destructive if you're taking, say, for example, I think there was a silver or box or something, and it was inside the silk bag, and the silk had been preserved to some extent on the outside. To see the full detail of the object, you have to x-ray and other things, but you can layer all that up on images and see things in different ways without actually destroying the object. And it also then makes that so much more accessible for the general public or even researchers to start seeing things in that they might otherwise in the past have to have traveled to somewhere to go and visit. Okay, our time is nearly up. I don't know if any of the speakers have got any questions from each other. No.
No questions. I would like to thank you all for the information and the informative presentations.
Likewise, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right, well, thank you. Sorry. Thank you very much. I just lost the screen briefly here. I'm working on a hotspot. Thank you so much, Sharjah, Nazra and David, for your very interesting approaches to this topic, and huge amount of work going on out there, which we're all very grateful for because we benefit from it, and it's bringing collections much more accessible to the general public and to researchers. So thank you very much.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to the second session of the webinar. It will be about how are the different institutions digitizing and archiving collection of the importance to the Arab region. My name is Ali Khayal, and I'm honored to be your moderator of this session. And our speakers for this session will be Ms. Samar Israel, a BMDA researcher and archivist at the Palestinian Museum. The second speaker, Ms. Fatan Rushdie, Resource Center Unit Head at Louvre, Abu Dhabi. The third speaker will be Dr. Zaki Aslan, Director of Regional Representative ICROM Sharjah, the Regional Conservation Center. Thank you all for joining us, and I hope our speaker will be inspiring you and having a very great session about digitalizing and archiving on their institute. Can we please start with Ms. Samar?
نقدر نبلش. أنا جاهزة. بس بدي أطلب من موزة إنها تشغل الفيديو اللي بيعرض التجربة في البداية طبعا هو بدون صوت، بس إحنا
I'm start.
هي عبارة عن كيف إحنا بنشتغل في مشروع الأرشيف الرقمي، وفي رقمنة أيضاً المجموعات الداعمة في المتحف الفلسطيني. إحنا عندنا مشروعين، أو في عندنا مشروع هو مشروع الأرشيف الرقمي، اللي من خلاله المتحف الفلسطيني استطاع إنه يحصل على 300,000 وثيقة مرقمنة، رقمنها للفلسطينيين في فلسطين، في الضفة، غزة، فلسطين التاريخية.
عربي والعربي انجلش في الاوبشنز،
وكمان في الشتات في الأردن وفي لبنان. وعملية الرقمنة هاي بتقوم بالأساس على رقمنة المواد وإعادتها لأصحابها، إلى أصحابها. وبس المتحف هو بياخذ هاي المواد برقمنها، بنشوفها على موقع الأرشيف الرقمي، بيرجعها لأصحابها. في المشروع الآخر اللي هو مشروع رقمنة المواد، الأرشيفات الدائمة أو المجموعات الدائمة الموجودة في المتحف، واللي هي عبارة عن أهم المجموعات كانت مجموعة الأثواب اللي وصلت المتحف الفلسطيني في عام 2020-2021. ومسموع صوتي في 2021 وصلت المتحف هاي المجموعة، وهي عبارة عن 80 ثوب وحوالي 200 قطعة تقريبا من الحلي والمجوهرات والمتعلقات الخاصة بالتراث الفلسطيني. المتحف قدر إنه بعد وصولها يرقمنها، ستكون متاحة للجميع قريبا إن شاء الله على موقع المتحف للاطلاع عليها. الجميل في المشاريع الرقمنة والتوثيق في المتحف الفلسطيني هو إنه هي بتسعى إلى نسج هاي القصة المستمرة والحكاية الفلسطينية حول التراث بالمقتنيات المادية وغير المادية التي يمتلكها الشعب الفلسطيني، وبتعتمد بتوثيقها أيضاً على الحكاية الفلسطينية التي تؤخذ من هذه القصة. فمثلاً في المجموعات الدائمة بيتم اللي هو توثيق قصة الثوب وحكايته، منطقته الجغرافية، من أين أتى، ونوع التطريز في الألوان المستخدمة، فيصبح هناك في حكاية تعرض للجمهور، وهذا يمكن المتحف من الوصول إلى الفلسطينيين الذين أصلاً بالأساس لا يستطيعون الوصول إلى فلسطين من خلال إتاحة هاي القصص وهي الصور وهي المقتنيات الرقمية الموجودة عنده. وأيضاً من خلال مشروع الأرشيف الرقمي هو بيعمل بذات الطريقة إنه يتيح للفلسطينيين التعرف أكثر خارج فلسطين على تاريخهم، خصوصاً إنه فيش إمكانية لوصولهم. وأيضاً هو من خلال هاي المنصات يوفر للباحثين سواء الفلسطينيين أو العالميين بشكل عام قدرة الوصول إلى وثائق ومصادر أولية فلسطينية تحتوي على هذه الرواية الفلسطينية المكتوبة. طبعاً المشروعين سواء مشروع اللي هي الأرشيف الرقمي أو مشاريع رقمنة المجموعات الدائمة هي يعني بترقمن أنواع مختلفة من الوثائق، مش بس صور ولا بس وثائق ورقية. أيضاً اليوم المتحف الفلسطيني عنده قدرة على تحويل الأفلام وعنده قدرة على تحويل الملفات الصوتية إلى ملفات رقمية، وأيضاً هو يصور لوحات فنية وقطع، فبالتالي عمله كامل ومتكامل. ومن أجل الأشياء إنه حتى مشروع الأرشيف وإن كان مشروع يخدم الجمهور الفلسطيني خارج المتحف ويتوجه إليهم من أجل اللي هو الحصول على الأرشيفات، مقتنيات المتحف أيضاً هي جزء من مشروع الأرشيف الرقمي. وأخص ذكر اللي هي المجموعات اللي فيها الوثائق أو الصور، هي جزء من منصة المشروع الرقمي ومعروضة على المشروع الرقمي. هدف المتحف توفير خدمة الرقمنة المجانية للفلسطينيين ومن أجل حماية وثائقهم من التلف من التلف والضياع أو المصادرة في بعض الأحيان بسبب السياسات الإسرائيلية. وأيضاً يعني مثلاً أهم مثال أول مجموعة تم رقمنتها في مشروع الأرشيف الرقمي كانت مجموعة دائمة في المتحف الفلسطيني، وهي مجموعة علي قزق، وهي مجموعة تضم أرشيفات صور ملصقات فيها أعمال فنية، جزء منها للفلسطينيين والجزء الآخر لفنانين وفنانين عالميين مناصرين للقضية. بشكل عام عملية التوثيق والأرشيف للمقتنيات أو في مشروع الأرشيف الرقمي بتمر بنفس الخطوات تقريبا، الاختلافات فقط في العمليات التقنية بما يخص التصوير، إذا كان هناك تصوير للأثواب أو للقطع أو تصوير للوثائق والصور. هذا اللي بقدر أقوله في كيف نعمل وماذا نقدم، وكل ذلك نعمله من أجل تحقيق رسالة ورؤية المتحف بأنه يكون عندنا ثقافة منفتحة تحررية تساهم في نقل الرواية الفلسطينية لإشراكها مع الفلسطينيين في الداخل والخارج ومع العالم بشكل عام. شكرا.
شكرا أستاذة سمر على المشروع جدا مميز في الديجيتاليزيشن. لو أنتم انخرطوا في المجتمع المحلي ولتوثيق هذه الوثائق أو المستندات المهمة والصور للمجتمع نفسه. شكرا لنقلة التجربة أستاذة سمر. إن شاء الله نرجع في آخر السيشن للأسئلة. Our second speaker is Ms. Faten, the head of Resource Center Unit in Louvre Abu Dhabi. Please.
شكرا جزيلا أستاذة عالية. لو ينفع نشير البرزنتيشن اللي بعتها يا إما. اوكي عظيم، شكرا جزيلا. وشكرا جزيلا لهيئة الشارقة للمتاحف على الدعوة الكريمة للمؤتمر. أنا حابة أتكلم بسرعة شديدة وباختصار شديد عن مشروع رقمنة هنا في متحف لوفر أبو ظبي. إحنا بدأناه في مركز المصادر، لأن مركز المصادر ليه في كذا مشروع مختلف بنشتغل فيه. يعني في مكتبة مفتوحة للجمهور في متحف لوفر أبو ظبي 3 أيام في الأسبوع. المركز كمان بيضم كل الوثائق اللي بتخص المجموعة الدائمة بتاعت متحف اللوفر أبو ظبي، لأن متهيألي كلكم عارفين إن مجموعة المتحف في جزئين: جزء المجموعة الدائمة بتاعت المتحف، وجزء تاني أعمال المتحف بيستعيرها من المتاحف الشريكة في فرنسا. 16 متحف في فرنسا متاحف شركة. فالتوثيق في مركز المصادر خاص بالمجموعة الدائمة للأوبرا أبو ظبي. والمشروع اللي أنا حابة أشارككم النهاردة بيه هو قاعدة البيانات اللي برضه بنديرها في مركز المصادر. لو ينفع نروح على السلايد الثانية. أوكي. ده صورة من قاعدة البيانات اللي بنستخدمها في المتحف، اسمها السوفت وير اسمه ميوزيوم بلس. وقاعدة بيانات المجموعات هي بتحتوي على معلومات علشان نوثق القطع الفنية. فيها تفاصيل طبعا مختلفة عن وصف العمل الفني نفسه، أهميته، تاريخ العرض، بيبليوغرافيا، كل البحث اللي الكوريتورز بيعملوه حوالين القطعة الفنية. جزء تاني من قاعدة البيانات بتاعتنا الخاصة عن إدارة المجموعات، يعني عن الكونزرفيشن، الحفاظ على العمل الفني، تقارير حالة العمل الفني، مكان الحفظ بتاع العمل الفني، وكل ما المكان بيتغير طبعا في تراكنج لتغيير المكان، إدارة المخاطر، كل التوثيق الخاص بالميزيوغرافي. جزء من قاعدة البيانات كمان بيهتم بإدارة الأصول الرقمية، كل ما يخص الصور بتاعة المجموعة الفنية، وإدارة الحقوق كمان بتاعة الصور. وآخر حاجة وده هيكون محتوى المؤتمر النهارده، هو الاونلاين كولكشن، قاعده البيانات اللي حاطينها على الويب سايت. لو ينفع نروح السلايد الثانيه. كل المجموعه بتاعه اللوفر ابو ظبي موجوده على الويب سايت. طبعا بنتبع في الفهرسه معايير عالميه، بنحاول نتبع معايير عالميه، معايير اللي حطها الذي ريسيرش انستيتيوت. بنستخدم مصطلحات نشرها الايكون، المصطلحات اللي نشرها الجيتي ريسيرش انستيتيوت، الجيتي فوكابلريز. وبالنسبه للغه الفرنسيه، لان طبعا واحد من الرولز بتاعه المتحف عندنا، اظن متهيألي كل اللي زار المتحف اخد باله ان كل المحتوى في متحف اللوفر ابو ظبي ب3 لغات: بالعربي، بالفرنساوي، وبالانجليزي. وقاعده البيانات بتاعه الاعمال الفنيه عندنا ب3 لغات برضو: عربي، فرنساوي، انجليزي. فبنشتغل كتير جدا على المصطلحات باللغة العربية، لأن للإنجليزي بنستخدم المصطلحات اللي نشرها الجيتي ريسيرش انستيتيوت. بالفرنساوي ميوزي دو فرانس، متاحف فرنسا، نشر برضه مصطلحات على الويب سايت بتاع وزارة الثقافة الفرنسية. لكن بالنسبة للغة العربية الموضوع مختلف، لأن مفيش قاعدة بيانات منشورة بالنسبة للمصطلحات الفنية. لو ينفع نروح على السلايد الثانية لو سمحتوا. ده بس شكل الاونلاين بورتال بتاعت مجموعة اللوفر أبو ظبي، واحنا المفروض ان شاء الله نوايا ننشره قريب على تاريخ افتتاح المتحف في شهر نوفمبر. هيكون الجو لايف بتاعت الاونلاين بورتال. لو ينفع نروح على السلايد اللي بعدها. وتوثيق مجموعة اللوفر أبو ظبي ونشر المجموعة على الويب سايت خلانا زي ما قلت إن إحنا نبحث في موضوع المصطلحات الفنية باللغة العربية. فبدأنا مشروع في اللوفر أبو ظبي. مشروع طبعا لسه في بدايته، بسيط جدا، بس إن شاء الله الحوار النهارده يقدر يساعدنا إن إحنا نعمل شراكة مع متاحف تانية تكون مهتمة بنفس الموضوع. مشروع اسمه بالعربي، والمشروع ده هدفه بحث المصطلحات العربية في مجال المتاحف ومجال تاريخ الفن. وهدف المشروع على المدى الطويل إن احنا نعمل زي مكنز أو قاموس مصطلحات يكون ب3 لغات، نقدر نستخدمه في الببليكيشنز، نقدر نستخدمه في الكوميونيكيشن، ونقدر نستخدمه لقاعدة بيانات في المتحف. فده باختصار شديد. إن شاء الله في حاجة تانية نتكلم عنها في المناقشة. شكرا جزيلا.
شكرا أستاذ فاطمة على المعلومات جدا ممتعة، والبروجكت المميز اللي تشتغلون عليه اللي هو والهدف منها أن إصدار قاموس ب3 لغات، قاموس مصطلحات. أعتقد بيكون له تأثير جدا مميز وإيجابي على المتاحف إن شاء الله. ننتقل للمتحدث الثالث دكتور زكي أصلان، المدير لمركز آيكون في الشارقة. تفضل دكتور زكي.
شكرا جزيلا أخت عليا. الصوت مسموع؟
نعم
تمام. شكرا جزيلا. شكرا لهيئة الشارقة للمتاحف لدعوة مكتب إكرام الشارقة للمشاركة في هذه المناسبة المهمة اليوم العالمي للمتاحف. فنحن سعيدين نكون معكم دائما. الحقيقة الموضوع مهم جدا، موضوع الجلسة، ورح نتكلم عن عمل الإكرام في السنوات الأخيرة بالذات في مجالات بناء القدرات في هذا المجال، وبعض المشاريع التنفيذية اللي قمنا فيها في المنظمة. حأتابع معكم في الأسئلة، ولكن بدي أطلب من زملائي إنه إحنا هون يعني عملنا عمل فريق متكامل. ففي زميلي المهندس أنور سابق حيكون معنا، والأخ أحمد فتال اللي هو أيضا طالب ومتدرب معنا في برنامج الماجستير، وبنعمل معكم مع الهيئة أيضا في متحف المحطة، وهو متحف مهم أيضا من متاحف الشارقة. فرح أنتقل لحتى نعطيكم بعض المقدمة لبعض الأنشطة اللي قمنا فيها في الأعوام الأخيرة، وبعدها نستكمل الحديث إن شاء الله. فرح نتكلم مثل ما حكيت على بناء القدرات وتوثيق التراث في مشروع مهم عملنا قبل 2 لمتاحف غرب السودان المجتمعية بتمويل من المجلس البريطاني، وأيضا عن عمل لبعض التراث، تسجيل التراث المبني أيضا اللي هو ضمن هذا مشروع المتاحف. نتكلم أيضا على المتحف نفسه كأيضا موضوع مهم، ليس فقط المجموعات المتحفية في داخله، لكن أيضا هو يعني كجهة كعنصر هام في حماية القطع المتحفية والمجموعات المتحفية. رح نتكلم أيضا على توثيق الأرشيف ورقمنته في نفس هذا المشروع، وبالنهاية رح نتطرق لمشروع المحطة. رح أترك الحديث لزميلي أنور يتحدث معكم على برنامج أو مشروع متاحف غرب السودان المجتمعية بداية، وبعدها مشروع المحطة مع الزميل أحمد فتان. تفضل أنور.
شكرا دكتور زكي. تحياتي للجميع. أتمنى يكون الصوت مسموع.
مسموع.
بمجال بناء القدرات، إكرم الشارقة يعني رسالته بناء القدرات بمجال الحفاظ على التراث الثقافي بالمنطقة العربية، والرقمني واستخدام التقنيات الحديثة بموضوع الحفاظ هو جزء من الأدوات اللي استخدمها المركز بهذا المجال من خلال دورات تدريبية كنا نقوم فيها ولا زلنا للعاملين بحقل التراث بالدول العربية، أو من خلال برنامج الماجستير اللي يقام بالتعاون مع جامعة الشارقة. كمان الرقمني والتوثيق استخدام التقنيات الحديثة جزء من هاي البرنامج، أو تدريبات خاصة طلبتها من المؤسسات الثقافية والتراثية داخل الإمارات، أو مشاريع قمنا فيها أو شاركنا فيها مع شركائنا من المنظمات الدولية. مثال رح احكي عن مشروع متاحف غرب السودان المجتمعية كمثال عن شلون التقنية الرقمية هي أداة هامة جدا للحفاظ على التراث وتوصيله للمستهدفين. التقنية هي بسيطة وهي معروفة، اللي هي تصوير الفيديو اللي هو متاح للجميع اليوم، لكن ليست تقنية بحد ذاتها، إنما جودة التصوير وموضوع التصوير والرسالة اللي بيحمله هذا الفيديو هو يعني الأمر اللي ذو القيمة بهذا المجال. توجهنا للتراث الحي بالسودان، توجهنا للقرى وللأرياف وللقبائل، توثيق الموسيقى، توثيق الأعياد، توثيق الزواج، توثيق الفروسية، الحياة الزراعية، صناعة القهوة، كل مختلف الطبيعة والآثار، كله تم إنجاز أكثر من 50 فيديو احترافي. هاي الفيديوهات لاقت طريقها للمتاحف ولاقت طريقها أيضا للوسائط الميديا بكل مكان، وأمامكم تشوفوا هاي اللينكس موجودة ومتاحة مجانية. دور المرأة، الحياة الروحية، ثقافة الترحال والبداوي وغيره. بدعوكم لو يعني تشوفوا هاي الفيديوهات. ايضا بالتقنيه الرقميه استخدمت مع شركائنا داخل الامارات العربيه المتحده. مثلا امامنا بنشوف على اليمين بالاعلى والاسفل حقيقه مشروع الدور اللي نفذ مع ام القوين، مع هيئة الاثار في ام القوين. قدمنا الخبره بمجال التوثيق والتصوير الرقمي والتصوير الفوتوغرامتري. على اليسار بالاعلى كمان مشروع في دبي، وبالاسفل مشروع في راس الخيمه لاحد الجوامع اللي اندثرت، واللي يعني لم يبقى منها الا هي الوثيقه. مشروع نفس المشروع بالسودان بمنطقه دارفور، وحقيقه كمان بالخرطوم وببعض المواقع الاخرى. هذا التوثيق اللي تم من خلال المسح والتصوير والنمذجه ثلاثيه الابعاد حفظ لنا كثير من المواقع اللي مهدده بالزوال واللي صعب الوصول لها حاليا. وعلى اليمين بتشوفوا قائمه طويله بهاي المواقع، يعني ما راح فيها كلها. هاي نموذج من توثيق متحف بيت الخليفه. طبعا هذا التوثيق قمنا فيه بالتعاون مع المتدربين داخل السودان، فهاي العمل جزء منه من اعمال المتدربين، وخاصه اللي قاموا بعمليات المسح التصويري واللي اشتغلوا على الكاميرات وعلى الطائره الكاميرات المحموله الدرونز. فبنشوف النماذج ثلاثيه الابعاد كيف انبنت مع مكونات. بدارفور بمنطقه صعبه الوصول لغير السودانيين وصعبه الوصول حاليا للسودانيين الخطيره كمان. هي هذا مثال جامع بمنطقه شوبا. هاي اللي عم تشوفوها هاي الصور لاول مره يعني يجري توثيقها. مواقع مستوطنات من الفترات القديمه الى فترات القرون الوسطى. بنشوف هاي المدينه المسوره اللي بداخلها البيت الكبير مع المباني العاديه والقصر، لاول مره هاي الممتلكات التراثيه وتشارك مع الاخرين. الوثائق يعني كتقنيه ثلاثيه الابعاد ممكن اي حدا يزورها من خلال الواقع المعزز امام النشيطات اللي ممكن اي حدا يعمل لها مسح بالموبايل او بالايباد وبيقدر يجيب الموديل اللي عنده على الطاوله او على ويشوف ويتجول حوله. بعض المواقع ايضا وضعناها على منصه ثلاثيه الابعاد مجانيه، كمان ممكن الوصول لها وتحميل النموذج ويشوفوا مين المدري. فيديو سريع عن ايضا المنتج اللي انشغل بهذا المشروع وكيف تستفيد من التوثيق الرقمي او التقنيه الرقميه بحفظ المبنى وبمشاركه هاي القيمه مع الآخر. هاي مدينه اندرمان. التوثيق اللي صار للمتحف المتحف يقول لك من 3 أجزاء القرن ال 18 و 19. ايضا توثيق التراث الرقمي اللي هو الوثائق والمخطوطات وارشيف التلفزيون وارشيف الجرائد وكذا. كمان كان لنا مشروع شريك ومشروع ذاكره السودان اللي اتى على توثيق كل المخطوطات وكل الارشيف القديم تبع داخل السودان، وايضا وضع على شبكه الانترنت متاح ضمن سماحيات معينه. وامامنا مثلا مدينه السواكن اللي اندثرت مثل ما انتم شايفين، هي اطلال لكن يتوفر ارشيف رقمي جيد جدا من الصور التاريخيه من المعلومات. هذا الارشيف تم وضعه بطريقه بحيث انه نوصل له من خلال نموذج ثلاثي الابعاد. كمان اللينك موجود بالاسفل، ممكن يتم الدخول له ونزور المدينه ببنيه ثلاثيه الابعاد ونقرا عن كل مبنى موجود. بعطي هلا الكلمه لزميلي احمد.
يعطيك العافيه استاذ انور، شكرا دكتور ذكي. تحياتي للجميع. انا بدي احكي بشكل سريع جدا كطالب ماستر بايكروم عن الكورسز اللي اخذناها اللي تتعلق بمجال الرقمنه. احد التقنيات اللي ركزنا عليها هي كانت البروجرامتري بشكل سريع.
عفوا استاذ احمد، بس الصوت مش مسموع بشكل واضح.
طيب افضل حاليا الصوت مسموع؟
لو يكون بعد شويه اكثر اقرب
تسمعوني بشكل اوضح؟ الصوت مسموع؟
نعم افضل حاليا.
رح احكي انا كطالب ماستر بايكروم عن بعض الكورسز اللي اخذناها اللي هي تتعلق بمجال الرقمنه للتراث الثقافي وتحديدا للمقتنيات المتحفيه. فاحد التقنيات اللي تم استخدامها هي تقنيه البروجرامتري. بشكل سريع جدا هي تعتمد على اخذ مجموعه من الصور وبعض القياسات للحصول على نموذج ثلاثي الابعاد. فتم التدرب على بعض المقتنيات الموجودة بمركز إيكوم الشارقة. فتم توثيق بعض المقتنيات المتحفية مثل ما بنشوف على الشمال هي أو على اليسار هي الصورة 2D العادية، بينما بنشوف على اليمين النموذج ثلاثي الأبعاد. طبعا مر بعدة مراحل بناء النموذج. فبنشوف مرحلة الدنس، مرحلة التكشر. طبعا ايضا تم التدرب على مقتنى ثاني ضمن مركز إيكروم شارقة. حاليا ضمن برنامج التدريب او الانترنشيب مع إيكروم صراحه بنشتغل على سكيل اكبر بكثير اللي هو السايت المحطه ميوزيوم مثل ما بنشوف حدود الموقع. فاول شيء تم عمل البوينت كلاود او القيمه النقطيه، ومن بعدها تم عمل الدنس والمش وصولا للمرحله النهائيه. بنلاحظ انه كيف الموقع نازل بحدوده الاساسيه تماما مثل ما نشوفه على الماب، فهذا دليل انه القياسات كانت صحيحه 100%. ايضا تم انتاج الصور المصححه، فبنشوف بالاعلى هي صوره للواجهه تقريبا طولها 120 متر، فهي صوره واحده بابعاد صحيحه. الصوره بالاسفل هي بتوضح انه كيف هي الصوره مدى الدقه فيها مهما عملنا زوم، فبنضل عم نشوف فيها الدمج او الماتيريال. ايضا تم العمل على الكورتيار الداخليه كمان، انتاج لها صور مصححه. وطبعا العمل لحد الان in progress، بس في يعني عمل ممكن شغل اكثر تحديدا بالاجزاء الداخليه، فان شاء الله خلال الفتره القادمه بيتم توثيق المتحف بالكامل.
شكرا جزيلا. الحقيقة بس حابين نعطيكم فكرة عن عملنا في أيضا في المباني اللي هي مباني متحفية، وكيف أيضا لها دور في حماية المجموعات في الداخل. طبعا رح نستكمل العمل مع متحف المحطة في توثيق المجموعات المتحفية أيضا في الداخل. فحتى نعطيكم نبذة عن عملنا من خلال الإشراف على بعض المشاريع مثل السودان، وعملنا أيضا بالتدريب مع الطلاب اللي بيعملوا معنا. شكرا جزيلا.
شكرا دكتور زكي وفريقك على العمل الجبار اللي تقومون فيه في توثيق التراث الحي والثقافي، وهذا جدا مهم في حفظ هذا التراث للأجيال القادمة. تشكرون عليه. وصلنا لنهاية الجلسة. في عندنا بعض الأسئلة إذا ممكن نجاوب عليها. بنبدأ مع أستاذة سمر. في عندنا سؤال: شو هو التأثير الإيجابي اللي وصلتوا له من خلال توثيق المقتنيات الخاصة بالمجتمع؟ وفي نفس الوقت كيف وصلتوا لثقة الجمهور أن يسلمونكم هذه المستندات وتوثقونها وتأرشفونها بشكل إلكتروني؟
هو اللي حصل إنه انطلق مشروع الأرشيف الرقمي في عام 2018. كان عندنا المرحلة الأولى منه. في المرحلة الأولى كان في صعوبة في الوصول للوثائق، بس يعني هاي صعوبة محدودة لأنه الفلسطيني بيخاف على أوراقه. المعنى الفلسطيني البحت الفلسطيني يعتبر إنه الورقة كقطعة الأرض، فبيخاف إنه يسلمها لأي جهة أو أي حدا خوفاً عليها من السرقة. فكان مهمتنا إحنا كباحثين ميدانيين آلية الإقناع، إنه كيف يكون عندنا آلية في إقناع الناس. فكنا نتوجه للناس نقنعهم. مرات كثيرة يأتون إلى المتحف يرون أين ستحفظ مقتنياتهم لحين ما تتم عودتها إلهم. مع انطلاق الموقع في 2019، وعندما شاهدوا إنه هاي الأوراق والصور تتاح للجمهور. طبعا إحنا موقعنا متاح للجمهور open access، كل الصور والوثائق والمقتنيات الموجودة عليه. هذا عزز ثقة الجمهور الفلسطيني بهذا المشروع، بالإضافة إلى أنه إحنا بنوقع اتفاقيات معهم إنه نتعهد بإعادة المواد، وفعلا بنحط مدة محددة، ناخذ الأغراض بنصورها بنرقمها بنرجعها للناس. فأصبح هناك في ثقة. العرض على المنصة وأيضا السوشيال ميديا المتحف الفلسطيني اللي كانت بتسلط الضوء على مشروع الأرشيف الرقمي وعلى حتى المقتنيات الدائمة، هي عززت عند الفلسطيني حب التعرف أكثر وحب أيضا بالمساهمة في هذا الموقع. إحنا يومياً بيجينا اتصالات إنه إحنا عندنا مجموعات، تعالوا خذوها أرشفوها صوروها ورجعوا لنا إياها. وكثير مرات كمان من الخارج أجانا اللي إما وثائق حقيقية أو صور هم تكفلوا أنهم يعملوا لها ديجيتايزيشن ويعطونا نسخة رقمية نوضعها على الموقع. طبعا في كثير أرشيفات تعمل في فلسطين ومواقع للأرشيف. ما يميز موقع المتحف الفلسطيني أنه يصل إلى كل الأرشيف المتحف الفلسطيني، يصل إلى كل الفلسطينيين، يهدف إلى اللي هو التوثيق لحكاية الفلسطيني من ما كان وأينما كان وفي أي فترة. يعني هو المشروع مدته من 1750 بيطلع على الوثائق، في وثائق عندنا على فكرة أقدم منها المخطوطات لحد يعني الانتفاضة الثانية 2002 2004. فهاي الفترة كلها موقع الأرشيف يحاول أن يغطيها بالوثائق الموجودة عنده. أنا في شهر نيسان كان كملت 5 سنين في مشروع الأرشيف الرقمي بمرحلتين، وشفت التطور اللي شهده المشروع في ظل كل المشاكل التي نعانيها إحنا الفلسطينيين داخل فلسطين، من إعاقة للحركة، إعاقة للوصول، لكل هاي الأمور، إلا إنه المشروع هذا استطاع هي التغلب على كل هاي المعوقات والوصول لأكبر شريحة ممكنة من الجمهور الفلسطيني والعالمي. يعني احنا اليوم يتم مراسلتنا من جهة عالمية إنه نريد الحصول على وثائق، نريد الحصول على طبعا نسخ رقمية عن الوثائق، والتجربة كانت فعلا ناجحة والجمهور بحبها وبتعامل معها بكثير من التقدير، خصوصا انه حتى اللي في فترة ما اصحاب مجموعات كانت ترفض اعطائنا المجموعات صارت تتصل علينا تحكي لنا تعالوا خذوا مجموعات، لانه الرقمنة بينت أهمية هذا المشروع، العرض، آلية العرض ورقمنته. وهذا كمان حصل في المجموعة الدائمة، إنه المجموعة الدائمة حصل عليها المتحف بعد زيارة سيدة اللي هي من لجنة حفظ التراث الفلسطيني في واشنطن للمتحف، لما شافت المختبر وشافت إنه عم بيرمموا، إحنا عندنا كمان مشروع ترميم مرتبط برقمنة الوثائق بالوثائق. لما شافت الوضع تواصلت مع السيدات الأخريات وحبت إنها تحكي لهم إنه هاي في مكان في فلسطين داخل فلسطين نستطيع إعادة هاي الأسباب التي خرجت من عام 1986 إليه. وفعلا رغم كل المعيقات استطاعوا الزملاء في دائرة المجموعات وفي المتحف أول اللي هو إحضار إعادة يعني هذه الأسباب على مراحل مختلفة، لأنه إحنا ما بنقدر نجيبها في صعوبة إنه إذا إحنا أعلنا عنها ممكن تتصادر، فتمت على مرحلة طويلة أحضرت هذه الأسباب، وبعد إحضارها تم اللي هو الإعلان عن وصولها إلى فلسطين ووصولها إلى المتحف الفلسطيني وعرضت، وتم شكر كل حدا ساهم لأنها كانت في حملة تمويل فلسطينية ساهم فيها رؤوس أموال فلسطينية إما في فلسطين وخارجها، لأنه المتحف لم يكن يمتلك القدرة المادية لإعادتها، ولم تمتلك أصلا السيدات في الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية القدرة، فتم تمويلها وتمويل شحنها، عملية شحنها ووصلت إلى المتحف الفلسطيني. ستعرض قريبا على الموقع كما قلت سابقا، موقع المتحف مش موقع الأرشيف الرقمي، لأنه إحنا نعنى أكثر بالوثائق أكثر من اللي هي القطع الإثنوغرافية. وأنا من هون بحب أحكي لكم إنه اطلعوا على شغلنا من خلال مشروع الأرشيف الرقمي على موقع الأرشيف وعلى موقع المتحف، لأنه إحنا في ظل المعيقات كلها التي نعيشها إلا إنه قادرين إنه نقدم شيء بما يخص التراث والثقافة الفلسطينية. شكرا.
شكرا أستاذة سمر. صراحة مشروع يحسب للمتحف الفلسطيني والرقمنة والثقة اللي حصلتوا عليها من المجتمع المحلي والعالمي. أتمنى لكم إن شاء الله التوفيق. أستاذة فاتن، مشروع رقمنة المقتنيات في لوفر أبو ظبي، شو هي توقعاتكم في مدى الاستفادة من هذه المجموعة التي سيتم نشرها عن طريق الأونلاين ب3 لغات؟ هل أنتم هدفكم من هذا المشروع للمختصين أم للعامة أو للمهنيين؟ مدى توقعاتكم من استفادة الناس لهالمشروع؟
شكرا أستاذ علي على السؤال، سؤال مهم جدا. هو طبعا هدفنا إن احنا مجموعة المتحف توصل لأكبر قدر ممكن من الجمهور، وإن هي تكون متاحة لكل الناس، سواء المختصين، سواء الهواة، سواء الناس اللي زارت المتحف أو ما زارتش المتحف. فهنحاول على قد ما نقدر إن إحنا المجموعة توصل لأكبر عدد ممكن من الناس. وده يعني هدفنا كمان إن إحنا المجموعة مش كلها طبعا معروضة في قاعات المتحف، خصوصا في جزء من المجموعة كل المجموعات الورقية، مثلا المخطوطات، الصور. عندنا دلوقتي مجموعة صور فوتوغرافية كبيرة، يعني أكثر من 5000 صورة دلوقتي في المتحف. طبعا دي مجموعات ما نقدرش نعرضها لفترة طويلة علشان بتتأثر بالضوء، بتتأثر بالانفايرمنت. فكل يعني هدفنا إن احنا نوضح مجموعة اللوفر أبو ظبي في مجملها ايه هي، لان طبعا ده اللوفر ابو ظبي كلكم عارفين اول متحف عالمي في العالم العربي. المجموعات بتشمل قطع من عصور ما قبل التاريخ للعصور المعاصره، من كل الثقافات في العالم، يعني من كل مكان في العالم. فهدفنا ان احنا نوضح الكونكشنز اللي المتحف بيحاول يخلقها بين الثقافات عن طريق بناء المجموعه بتاعته. وعلشان كده احنا بندرس بالتفصيل موضوع اللغات، لان حاجه مهمه جدا بالنسبه لنا، حاجه مهمه جدا ان يكون المجموعه متاحه بالثلاث لغات، بغض النظر عن ان هو ريكوايرمنت في الاتفاق الحكومي بين حكومه دوله الامارات والحكومه الفرنسيه ان تكون اللغات المستخدمه في المتحف في كل حاجه، في القاعات، في الليبلز، حتى في السوشيال ميديا، كل الكوميونيكيشن بثلاث لغات. بس بالنسبه لنا مهم جدا ان احنا نعكس الموضوع ده على المجموعه الرقميه، على الموقع، لان دراسة المصطلحات مهمة جدا يعني، وحاجة من التحديات الكبيرة اللي بتواجهنا، لأن إزاي مثلا نوصف تقنية من العصور الوسطى في أوروبا باللغة العربية، وفي نفس الوقت إزاي نوصف باللغات التانية بالفرنساوي أو بالإنجليزي مثلا عناصر زخرفية، عناصر معمارية خاصة بالعالم العربي. فبصراحة مشروع كبير جدا ومهم، لأن متهيألي متاحف كتير أو مؤسسات ثقافية كتير هتكون مهتمة بالموضوع. فدي حاجة بالنسبة لنا برضو من كمان جزء من الإتاحة، إن احنا نتيح المجموعة لأكبر عدد ممكن من الناس تقدر توصل للمعلومات.
شكرا أستاذة فاتن، لا شك المشروع جدا كبير ويعطيكم العافية. دكتور زكي، في عنا سؤال عن كيفية ما شاء الله على المشاريع اللي قدمتوها في السودان في الدول، كيف كان تقييمكم للمكان، الأولوية لاختياركم لهذا المكان لتوثيقه أو لأرشفته؟
حقيقة فكرة المتاحف المجتمعية هي في سياق موضوع اليوم، لأنه هو أهمية وصول المعلومات والقطع الموجودة في المتاحف ونشر المعلومات، سواء من خلال الفيديوهات مثل ما شرح زميلي أنور، من خلال أيضا الوصول للمقتنيات خارج المتحف، فمن خلال التكنولوجيا ومن خلال الرقمنة. كان مهم جدا في هذا المشروع. يعني اختيارنا لهذا المشروع كان مهم، والأولوية كانت يعني بارزة من أهمية فكرة المتحف المجتمعي، في أهمية توسيع نطاق الوصول أيضا للمجتمعات وتفاعلها أيضا مع المتاحف من خلال طبعا الرقمنة، مثل ما شفتوا في العرض اللي يعني شرحه زميلي أنور. فأهمية هذا يعني اختيار هذا المشروع واختيار هذا المكان كان له علاقة مهمة في الإمكانيات التي تتيح التكنولوجيا أو التقنية المتاحة في الوصول للمجتمعات وتفاعلها في يعني مع المتاحف والمجموعات المتحفية، وأيضا البحث. يعني شفت بعض الصور أيضا لمواقع ممكن ما نوصلها تعرض الآن من خلال هذه العروضات، سواء أونلاين أو سواء في المتحف نفسه. يعني ممكن هناك أدوات وتوجهات مختلفة للوصول لمثل هذه المعلومات التي يندر أن ممكن نوصل لها من دون استخدام هذه التقنيات. فبعرفش إذا جاوبت على سؤالك أخت عليا. يعني اختيار هذا المشروع يصب في أهمية دور المجتمعات في دور المتاحف في الوصول للمجتمعات، والعكس أيضا. كيف تصل يعني يكون هناك في تفاعل أكبر من خلال المجتمعات للوصول للمتاحف من خلال هذه التقنيات الحديثة.
ممتاز.
هذا كان السبب الأساسي حقيقة لاختيار مثل هذه المشاريع كمشاريع نموذجية ممكن تستفيد منها المتاحف الأخرى في دول مختلفة. لأنه المتحف ومفهومه كما يعني التعريف الجديد للآيكوم الأخير لمفهوم المتحف هو أيضا أهمية البعد المجتمعي والبعد التفاعلي مع الناس. فهي كمؤسسات ثقافية مهمة في يعني ترابط المجتمع، فهمه لتاريخه، فهمه ل يعني حتى في حالة اللوفر مثلا تاريخ الإنسانية إلى آخره. فهذا كل هذه أمور مهمة ولها أبعاد مختلفة.
بلا شك. دكتور زكي، الجهود يعني اللي تقوموا فيها أبدا مش بسيطة. صور، فيديوهات، تصوير. فهل هناك أي معرض خاص بالآيكروم ينقل للناس هذا الأرشيف التقني؟ هل هناك معارض خاصة بآيكروم لعرض كل هذه الجهود؟
يعني الحقيقة هذه كلها متاحة عبر الإنترنت. موجود أفلام، موجود فيلم خاص في المشروع أيضا موجود على المنصة عندنا في الإيكروم، في منصة يعني الويب سايت الخاص بالإيكروم. فهذا ما عملنا. حقيقة كان عندنا أيضا معارض خاصة كانت في الشارقة في ديسمبر الماضي. كان أيضا عندنا معرض متكامل لمشروع السودان على سبيل المثال في معهد أفريقيا في الشارقة كما ذكرت. وكان معرض مهم لأنه أيضا أتاح للناس اللي حضرت هذا المعرض أنهم يشوفوا كيف ممكن استخدام التقنيات الحديثة مثل الجولات الافتراضية من خلال الواقع الافتراضي أو الواقع المعزز في استخدام التابلت. يعني كانت موجودة أيضا في هذا المعرض. فعلى صعيد المعارض يعني يعني من ناحية مادية كان هناك معرض خاص في الشارقة. لكن كما ذكرت هناك عرض لكل هذه المشاريع من خلال منصات المتاحة أونلاين أو على الإنترنت.
شكرا دكتور زكي. هل هناك أي مشاريع قادمة بالإضافة إلى متحف المحطة؟
طبعا متحف المحطة مهم جدا قبل ما أحكي عن المشاريع الإضافية، لأنه أعتقد مشروع متحف المحطة أيضا كما ذكر زميلنا أستاذ أحمد، مهندس أحمد، يعني هو مشروع نقوم به مع الزملاء في تعاون مع هيئة المتاحف في التعريف بأهمية هذه التقنيات. ليس فقط يعني في يعني المتحف أصبح هو جزء لا يتجزأ من المجموعات المتحفية، فهو عنصر هام أيضا ممكن نفسر فيه كيف أهمية التوثيق الدقيق بالذات، واللي هو مهم لاتخاذ كل الخطوات القادمة لوضع الخطط الماستر بلان لمثل هذا المتحف. فهو مشروع نموذجي. هلا مشاريع أخرى أكيد نحن منفتحين على يعني استقبال أي طلبات لأنه نعمل تطبيق لكل هذه المنهجيات اللي متوفرة في مشاريع قادمة. حاليا يعني هذا هو المشروع اللي نحن سعيدين في المشاركة فيه مع هيئة متاحف الشارقة، وكما ذكرت حيكون هناك أيضا استكمال لتوثيق المقتنيات المتحفية، والهدف الأساسي هو وضع خطة ليس فقط للعرض ولكن أيضا للحفاظ على المبنى، للحفاظ على المقتنيات، لعرض هذه المقتنيات وإتاحتها للزوار ماديا يعني فيزيائيا أو خارج عبر إتاحتها على الإنترنت أو على المنصات الأونلاين. فنحن الحقيقة مشاريع قادمة لسه ما في يعني شيء جديد، لكن سعيدين جدا في التعاون في مشروع المحطة.
شكرا جزيلا دكتور زكي، وأشكر بعد الأستاذة فاتن والأستاذة سمر على مشاركتكم معنا في الجلسة. معلومات جدا مهمة ومفيدة لنشرها للجمهور، فإن شاء الله الجميع يكون استفاد من هذه الجلسة.
أخت علي إذا ذكرت بس في عندنا مشروع أيضا في عمان على فكرة، في البيوت القديمة اللي كان يسكنها العائلة الحاكمة، هناك أيضا جزء لا يتجزأ من مسار المتحف الوطني في عمان. هناك أيضا عمل لتوثيق المباني وأيضا المقتنيات اللي ستكون جزء من التعريف بالتراث في مسقط يعني وفي عمان.
ما شاء الله. نتمنى لكم كل التوفيق إن شاء الله في مشاريعكم القادمة، ونطلع للجلسة إن شاء الله الثالثة من هذا المؤتمر الافتراضي. شكرا جزيلا.
شكرا لك علي.
شكرا جزيلا علي. شكرا.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamu alaikum. We are right now in the third session. I hope everyone can hear me very easily. And if there is any kind of technical issue we would like to address, please let us know. So in our third session, we are going to address engaging audiences through digital platforms. So basically, if I would like to remind you to today's importance, we are celebrating the Museum Day, which is set by ICOM, International Council of Museum. And ICOM has, after long discussions, set the definition. Like in that aspect, this is also embracing issues that is also addressed in sustainable development discussion. Like a museum is a not-for-profit permanent institution in the service of society, which we are going to address today, that researches, collects, conserves, interprets, exhibits tangible and intangible heritage, which was already very well discussed, open to the public, accessible, inclusive. Museum foster diversity and sustainability. These are very important parts of the definition ICOM set for us. Today, with distinguished experts on this panel, I'm going to moderate the session about audience engagement. My name is Gökçe Okandan. I'm faculty at American University Sharjah, and previously I was a professor of strategic management in cultural and creative industries. That is very relevant to today's discussion. Let me welcome also distinguished speakers, Shamam Al-Kipti from Sharjah Museums Authority. She is taking executive roles in the marketing, in an approach of holistic marketing. And our distinguished contributor, Sheikha Nawar Al-Qasimi, the Vice President of Sharjah Art Foundation. And in this respect, living more than 1.5 years in Sharjah and welcoming the cultural ecosystem here. So I'm very, very honored to be in the same panel with these distinguished speakers and institutions. And very important notions have been addressed since the start of this conference about digitalization, about collections, about memory, about trust building. So I have noted most of them. But without further ado, I would like to invite our first speaker, Shamma, to the panel to address the understanding of Sharjah Museum Authority for engaging audience, and several examples that they are working on. It is also my pleasure to be working with Sharjah Museum authorities in collaboration for our senior students capstone project. I am faculty in the Department of Design Management, and our senior students have addressed some kind of solutions towards the challenges set by Sharjah Museum authorities. And we are very happy to foster this collaboration, as well as it is mentioned in SDG 70, collaboration is the heart of sustainable development. The word is yours, Shamma.
Sorry. Thank you, Gökçe, for the introduction, and thank you, Sharjah Museums, for inviting me to be part of this prestigious conference. Good afternoon, everybody. I just wanted to double check if my screen is visible. Okay. Do you see any notes, by the way? Okay. Just making sure. Okay, I wanted to start with introducing Sharjah Museums for those who doesn't know Sharjah Museums and the work we do. Sharjah Museums Authority overlooks 16 locations, 16 museums, which are located across the Emirates, starting from here, the heart of the city, Sharjah, until the east coast of Kalba and Khorfakkan. Amongst those museums that makes Sharjah unique are Sharjah Aquarium, which is the first and largest government educational center in the UAE. Also the first maritime and art and calligraphy museums in the Arabian Gulf. Sharjah Museums also host international exhibitions that includes never seen before collections, events and programs that are on the agenda throughout the year of the museums. Those workshops and programs are catered for children, youth, students, families, people with disabilities, and the list goes on. Here also an example of the things that Sharjah Museums offers for the audience, which are initiatives and programs and events, which focuses on unique interactive experiences for the museums. We also here in Sharjah Museums focus on social responsibility initiatives that tackles issues or topics such as environment, health, and social community. Yes, Nawar. I hope I gave a good introduction about SMA.
Thank you very much. Yes, and we are very thrilled to have 16 different representation of museums in Sharjah, which is addressed very rightly in the late 90s as the cultural capital of the Arab region. And another very important partner here is Sharjah Art Foundation, and we are right now experiencing a legacy of the 15th biennial this year throughout 30 years, which is very important notions in strategic management, as you both know, a legacy of 30 years. So congratulations on that. Without further ado, I also would like to invite Sheikh Navar to maybe address some notions about the institution It is my pleasure to host a graduate of AUS and here in this panel with the expertise of many years for sure, but with the fundamental starting point that I can also share. Please, Sheikh Nabar.
Thank you, Dr. Akçay. Thank you, Sharma. I wanted to first thank you for inviting me to be part of this panel, and thank everybody that was speaking earlier today. It was really informative and very thought-provoking, and lots of learning lessons and inspiration for sure. I wanted to just give you a brief in my presentation, or what I'm talking about, on some current projects that the foundation's working on or showing today, so that it's quite relevant, and everything I'm going to talk about today are things that you can see today in Sharjah. We, as the Sharjah Art Foundation, we're a nonprofit government entity for people who don't know the foundation. We are based in, our main headquarters are in the heart of Sharjah. We started, or the foundation emerged from a biennial actually. So we have a very interesting model of working where there was a biennial that was existing. And because of the impact of the biennial and because of its legacy, a foundation was then created to sustain the mission of the biennial and the work that it was doing. And then of course, to introduce more programs and things that the community in Sharjah needed. Something very interesting and that I wanted to address also, or something that we're very proud of, is that we're working very closely with AUS as well during this biennial. And it's something exciting because when I was a student many years ago, everybody went to the biennial and we were super engaged, and it was because of the faculty that we had at the time. And very recently, we've also started building stronger connections with the university. And there is a Sharjah Biennial 15 course being taught at AUS today, and the students have presented their works. Artists have been working very closely with them and speaking to them, and they've been doing works and had a small presentation or a review session. So it's exciting to see the connections and the engagements. I don't know if I should start my presentation or if somebody wants to open the first slides, just to have an overview. Thank you so much. So we're basically, this is kind of where we're situated. These are our exhibition spaces. And as you can see, they are right between the heritage homes in Sharjah. So our location is very interesting. As an institution, we always have to think of who our audiences are. And, you know, the question is, are audiences people who come to see art and come to biennials and are art professionals, or are they also people who live and work in the neighborhood or in the souk next door and share spaces with us? Or are they also people who walk into our spaces by accident and discover something? And the answer is all of the above. And when we're thinking of audiences and how to reach them, we're always trying to kind of speak to different people through different mediums. Digital media being a very important channel, and technology being an important channel. But sometimes I think technology can be not misleading, but sometimes it can be very limiting, because we always assume that tech and social media and the internet are the best ways to reach everybody, but there is also a large audience that is not always online. And this is sort of one of the reasons why we also prefer to do a lot of things in person, as much as we are an entity that is using digital technologies in the content that we show in exhibitions, or working with artists who use different mediums such as AR and VR. We still do a lot of things the analog way, just for the reason that when you're talking about art and you're talking about, or when you're showing art, sometimes the in-person experience is very important. In my next slide, I wanted to show the Rain Room in Sharjah. Can we go? Yes, thank you. The Rain Room in Sharjah. So this is the project that uses digital technology and is really the intersection between the human, the machine, and the environment. And this is one of the projects that I would say transformed Sharjah's landscape and has really, I mean, Sharjah's already been on the map in terms of like art and culture, but I think the Rain Room really put it on the map as a tourist destination, the Rain Room specifically. We've had the most incredible experiences in the Rain Room. We've seen people interact with it in different ways, and it's brought people from all over. And it's a project that brought in so many non-arts audiences to SAF and to Sharjah, and maybe audiences that we weren't necessarily engaging with in the beginning. And sometimes, you know, because of the nature of the project, people don't always make a distinction between the Rain Room, the foundation, Sharjah, etc. But that's also fine. I think people are having very meaningful experiences. And an interesting part of, for people who haven't been to the Rain Room yet, I urge you all to visit because it's raining in there and it's quite hot outside. But for people who haven't visited or don't know much about the technology, basically the Rain Room uses sensors to interact with humans as they walk under the rain. And then when you walk under it, it stops. And the idea is also this relationship between human and machine. And we as humans have gotten used to technology and things are becoming more and more automated. You've got autocorrect on your texts, you've got self-driving automated vehicles, sensors. And in the Rain Room, there is kind of this shift in power or a little balance that human and machine have to do together. So it's very, very interesting. In the next project, on the next slide is Remote Sharjah by Rimini Protocol. This is not on view anymore, unfortunately, but it's a project we showed last year. And this is a very different experience where people put on these headsets and we had them in different languages. So it's a voice automated project where somebody talks to you and takes you through Sharjah. And we started in the heritage area and you end up in Al Majaz and you go through the animal market and you walk past the graveyard and you get on a bus. And we had created this project with the artist Rimini Protocol in multiple languages. So we used English, Arabic, Urdu, and Malayalam just because of the number of people speaking these languages in the neighborhood. It was quite successful. It was an easy project because it wasn't so intimidating in the sense that whoever you are, you could come and pick up a headset and just go. You don't have to come from an arts background. You don't have to be familiar with art. Everybody can enjoy it. But what was very interesting was you're being guided by a voice that is telling you what to do. And it was interesting to see how different people in different age groups interacted with that voice, where people hesitated. So for example, older people hesitated in some instances and younger people just went for it. So it's very interesting also to see how comfortable we are with technology and how different people use it or interact with it. And this is a project where, unlike the Rain Room, you completely give yourself into technology and you just do what this kind of voice tells you. In the next slide is a project by Jory Minaya. She's an artist who is working with QR code wallpaper. This is in the old Al Hamriya Diwan, which is one of the venues of Sharjah Biennial, and this is the project in the Biennial. So Jory is a young artist who's created QR codes embedded within a wallpaper. And I just wanted to show this as an example of how artists are using technology in their practice. And the patterns in the wallpaper are from a popular style of wallpaper that was popular in the 40s and 50s when the American imperialist presence was very strong in Latin America. So she's kind of like using her QR codes to blur these images and to kind of break that idea of fantasy, exoticness, domestication, and consumerism that came out in these projects. And when you scan them, you go to websites that talk about other cultural and consumer products that were derived from nature that are kind of still exploiting that nature. So she's making really interesting work using QR codes that are, of course, accessible to almost everybody who has a smartphone and who has an internet connection. In the next project, Kahurangiriki Smith is an artist who is from New Zealand. She's an indigenous artist and she's from a Maori tribe, and she created a very analog video game. that talks about, well, to show part of her culture, but that also talks about mythology. And it was inspired by her mother's thesis on rediscovering the feminine. And it's very interesting when you think of games and gaming and the networks that go about video games, and the number of, well, the boundaries and the number of people that a project like this could reach. I mean, at the current time, her projects are just in art spaces, but imagine that something like this could be online. You could be engaging with people around the world and talking about a specific heritage, mythology, or culture that not many people are familiar with. And on the next slide, an Indigenous artist, Tahila Mintz, created a VR work talking about art, ancestral systems of matriarchy, gender, and contemporary indigenous issues. And she tries to work around unraveling colonial interventions, and works with community and nature and relationships with the natural world. So Tahila is an artist that lives on a nature reserve on protected ancestral land. She came to Sharjah to work on this project, and she really wanted to talk about issues that matter to her and wanted to share knowledge. And she used 360 mapping technology and spent a lot of time in nature. She filmed at the turtle conservatory in Kalba, and she's created quite an impressive project. Again, that she talks about where she links the connections between ancestral lands and nature from where she's from to here in Sharjah, and created a project that was accessible to everybody who was in that space. But again, digital technologies are not always accessible because people who have vision impairments or are blind, of course, would not be able to interact with this work. So artists are talking about, or artists are using technology in so many ways, but there is always, I think, a drawback, and maybe we can talk about it later. On the next slide, there's one project that we worked on, or an exhibition that we worked on in the heart of another country. And it was a collections exhibition that we showed in Hamburg, and is coming to Sharjah now. And this was the largest exhibition we've done of our collection. It had over 150 works from the Sharjah Art Foundation collection. So like many museums, we also collect. We've been collecting since the very early biennials. And we've never really, until recently, properly logged or documented our collection, or have documented it to be used or to be accessed by the public. We've always documented things internally and used internal systems similar to what the Louvre is using now, actually. But with this project, it was kind of our first, let's say, step into publicizing our collection. And we created 3D models that we mapped. So if you go onto the website in the heart of another country.de, you can see these 3D views of some of the objects and sculptures in the show. And it took us quite some time to get it together. We did it internally with our team, but I think this is going to be a step for us to continue to document the rest of our collection and put it online. And in my last slide, I wanted to also mention very quickly a podcast that we created called Biennial Bites. And it's a podcast we created with some artists who are in the biennial, and we're looking at, we've disseminated them. You can get them on Apple, Spotify, Google, and anywhere else you can hear your podcasts. And there are conversations with artists in English, and some episodes are in Arabic, and they're coming out as we go. And we've also just started now going into the podcast world, but we're also, I don't know if people know this, but we also have the old Sharjah radio station is also under the care of Sharjah Art Foundation. So it's a building that we're restoring, and maybe soon we will launch a radio as well. So we're kind of, I don't want to say we're well versed in technology. We're working in different mediums with technology, but the more we continue to do the work that we do, we are learning as we go, and we're looking at, of course, the successes, but also the limitations that that technology puts on us as well.
Thank you so much, Sheikha Navar. Brilliant examples, which is actually well appreciated by our audience. Mona Bakshesh is mentioning about the interesting QR codes. Couple of years back, we were doing a study with Istanbul Foundation Culture and Arts, and we were addressing some kind of challenges for engagement, and not only the physical or financial, which is not the case because both institutions are serving for accessibility, but also emotional challenges that is addressed and that has been solved through different senses that you have addressed in your examples, is an important topic, and maybe we can discuss about it after the presentation of Sharjah Museum Authority. So in contemporary art, there also the use of technology for arts making is an issue. But for the heritage, for any related other museum domain, with the engagement of Gen Z, especially the youth, things are becoming more and more interesting. So there are a lot of examples that Sharjah Museum Authority is elaborating on this aspect, and through our collaboration, we have also seen some different examples of it. So I would like to give the voice again to Shamma to elaborate more on these examples so that we can maybe connect both heritage and contemporary art sides together.
Thank you, Gökçe. I would be talking about the engagement that we had with the SMA audience during those elaborated examples you've seen. SMA focuses on the audience engagement on both off-site and on-site. In terms of the off-site, social media is one of our main tools which we use to raise awareness and promote the museums, its collections, events, exhibitions that are on, and also promote or encourage visiting the museums. We also use the channels to do some cross advertising with other institutions that are strategic partners, such as Sharjah Art Foundation here. Today, social media plays a huge role. It is considered the new word of mouth because people talk, share their opinion, thoughts, and experiences with their families, friends, and followers on social media. This talk about any brand, or in the case of Sharjah Museums, is something very important to pay attention to, especially being always present and active on social media channels is also very important because the audience needs to see you among all the other social media feeds. One of the key things here I'm sharing with you, I don't want the sound to be loud as I'll be talking. So one of the key things that Sharjah Museums focuses on is following trends that museums can be related to and appropriate. This expands to the audience locally here or internationally. Another very important aspect that Sharjah Museums focuses on when it comes to social media is that we share the work of or behind the scenes work of SMA employees. This helps create this human relation or attachment with any brand. Here I'm sharing a few examples of the latest posts that we did and we got high interactions on. And if you follow our social media accounts, you'll be able to see more. I will be talking more about audience engagement on site, which we approach here using technology. Sharjah Museums works always on enriching and upgrading its offerings for a better visitor experience at its museums. The latest technologies in museums helped in making the audience interested, engaged, and targeted different age groups at our museums. One of Sharjah Museum's main goals is fostering sustainable development and forging new partnerships to enrich future generation of creative thinkers with knowledge and skill. And this is one of the examples that we worked with the AUS with. A very good example, another example that I'm sharing today is this partnership, our latest partnership, which we launched the Resistance Monument augmented reality experience. Here, I'll share a video of it. This project is an outcome of the Access Sharjah Challenge, which is launched by Sharjah Entrepreneurship Center, Shara, in partnership with the Ministry of Culture and Youth, and in strategic partnership with SMA and Air Arabia, where the Sharjah startup Fifth Wall Immersive Media Lab, founded by Dr. Suhail Dahdal, and thank you for that video, Dr. Suhail. He won the challenge and was able to achieve it on real life at the monument, the Khorfakan Resistance Monument. This UAE's first of its kind augmented reality. Okay, sorry, stopped playing. Okay. This first of its kind augmented reality experience that brings the Resistance Monument story to life by providing a unique storytelling of Khorfakan heroic resistance during the Portuguese invasion back in 1507. Combining Fifth Wall combined the artificial intelligence gaze technology with the latest AR foundation technology. More here. Okay, here you can see how this technology works. This technology allows people to interact with the physical environment of the museum and the objects around it, seamlessly with the physical space also, as you can see here. The character you see in that video is the main character, or inspired by the main character at, so it keeps stops, sorry. Yes. So the character you see here in the video is the main character from the film, the award-winning film Khorfakan, that was inspired by His Highness book and was produced by Sharjah Broadcasting Authority. So we use this character to link it to the project, as this character is the same one in the movie that is already shown at the cinema in the Resistance. So if you try this experience, you can go directly to the cinema and watch the movie, and then you have a complete story of the monument. Okay, Gökçe, do you have any questions regarding that, or shall I continue?
No, actually, I was passionately watching it. So also during our collaboration with our senior students, Dr. Suhail kindly agreed to visit our classroom, and he shared also this example. And from an entrepreneurial perspective, I'm very thrilled that Fifth Wall, his venture, is collaborating with strategic partners in that domain, and it is a very successful creative entrepreneurial venture. So I think all these activities not only a kind of public service, but this is actually shaping the next generation through different perspectives, be it the creative mind, be it the entrepreneurial spirit, be it the engagement, be it the value of cultural heritage. So all of it is there in this example. Thank you very much for the elaboration.
Thank you.
So shall we, yeah, the last one is about the engagement of the children, I guess, yes.
Yeah. Okay, I can go on that example if it is possible.
Sure, please go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. I'm excited to talk about this gallery. So we here in Sharjah Museums, it's very important for us to always have a sustainable discussion and engage with the audience, especially the frequent visitors we have. We also always observe the visitor statistics of our museums because this opens a discussion between us and the audience, which helps us create fantastic opportunities. And we at Sharjah Museums, we did embrace a lot of those opportunities. And I'm sharing here a few examples of the opportunities that we seeked, which is here, the photo you see, and I'm going to play the video. So use the sound, okay. The first opportunity was this Sharjah Archaeology Museum family visit. We noticed that there was like a drop or not much visitors from the children aged between 4 to 12 years old, where as families, they were not considering Sharjah Archaeology Museum to visit due to the heavy information that it had, and children could not interact with such information. Due to that, we opened the UAE's first interactive hall that teaches children about archaeology and Sharjah antiquities. The way the hall has been designed, the techniques, the interactives, the models, helps in develop children's senses, interact with the collection, stimulate their imagination, and be a safe space for learning and having fun at museum. Another example I'm going to share also regarding taking the opportunities is listening to the audience. After listening to the audience's comments, we were able to launch a new section at our department, the LAM department, which is dedicated only for youth, as there was not major focus on that category. And also we were able to create those walk-in workshops at all of our museums, because most of the families were they prefer not to be committed to a certain time or date. They wanted to visit museums at times that are suitable for them, especially the change of the holiday days between the government and the private. So we created the walk-in workshops. Any family can visit any of our museums and there will be a workshop ready for them to enjoy as family. In terms of those examples I shared, we measured the impact of those projects. So engaging here, I have two examples from the one shared. In terms of the social media, we noticed that there was an organic increase in the number of the followers after upgrading our content on social media. On the left side, you can see here the number of the families, children, and adults visiting the museums for the workshops after launching the walk-in workshops I mentioned before. In terms of the interactive hall I shared the Archaeology Museum, we noticed there was a huge increase in the number of visitors from the children, and also an increase in the total number of the visitors comparing from the same period of time the year before. Okay, sorry.
great examples, really, and we can see the impact. So in the first session, the data-drivenness has been addressed. And right now we can see where we can easily link into sustainable development. This year's theme is wellness. So to address again our values, to bring more time with family, to use art for well-being. So all these notions have an answer in this kind of engagement. Congratulations on that. And thank you very much for sharing these examples. The young generation to be introduced to museum as soon as possible, I think plays a very important role for pedagogy as well. So I remember our friend curator Vasif Kortun was telling us a story that he was introduced to Pompidou at age 6, and he has decided to become an art person. At that time, he didn't know what was curator. He decided to become a part of this environment. I am sure that this engagement is going to influence the future of many young individuals in this region. So I think these examples are also supporting our audience maybe for further discussion. We are welcoming all questions. I just wanted to mention if there will be any interaction Q&A box. So I welcome that. Meanwhile, I would like you to ask a maybe final question. So in the first session, Professor David has addressed the recent technological developments and AI, and Sheikha Nawar has also mentioned about this human aspect, where maybe being a little bit having a critical perspective towards all these technological developments, not only just adapted but also digested in that way if necessary, if this is the way it should go. How do you see the future? How do you see how we are going to balance this in-person human element and technological progress? In that sense, I would like to start maybe from with Sheikha Nawar.
I'm very worried about the future, to be honest, if I can be real. However, I think really, if you look at what's happening right now and today, we are the internet generation, right? Like, we grew up on the internet, we remember pre-internet, and we used to go online, and today we go offline. We tell people we are unavailable, we're going offline. And the youth of today are completely immersed in technologies, and I feel like the way that the lines between online and offline are going to be very blurred, and I don't think people are going to make a distinction. And I think people will have experiences that are very similar to the experiences that we have in our real life, both online and offline. And I don't think that distinction will even be noticeable in the future. And I hope that I'm wrong, but I feel like this is the direction that we're going. But in terms of like what we can be and what we should be doing as institutions, I think, or just as people working in the cultural realm, I think it's important to still do things in real time. Because again, you are addressing very different people and different audiences. And to counter that, it's also equally important to focus on things in the digital, but specifically for me personally, I think something that I've seen being done and was likely touched upon in earlier sessions is documenting heritage. Not just looking at the future of technologies, but looking at the future of the world. We don't know where it's going. You have an environmental crisis, you have all of these wars happening. There's so much at risk, and I think heritage sites and heritage and cultural sites should be preserved, and I think we have the technologies to do that. There's a very famous project called Project Mosul, which I think a lot of people know about, that really started started as a digital restoration of heritage, and there are websites that are crowdfunding platforms for individuals to get up and start mapping, creating images of sites and putting them online. I don't think we need to necessarily wait for other people to do it. I think it's important, you know, people will always wait for a large organization to come and do something like this. But I think as humans and as individuals, it's important for us to protect and preserve and digitize what we have today before it's too late, because there are so many factors at risk.
Yeah, thank you so much, which actually reminded me, I was giving courses on fundraising in my previous career as professor of cultural management, and in the audience engagement in fundraising activities, crowdfunding is also such an important tool, because if you start contributing, you are feeling as a part of it. So we are here in UAE, in Sharjah, very lucky that a lot of cultural events are supported by the government and is free access. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's all over the world like this. So in different regions, there are a lot of activities that also cultural enthusiasts can become a part, which might be linked to their identity also. So unfortunately, after the earthquake in Turkey, we have also built a kind of collective for the protection of cultural heritage in Hatay, in Antakya. And we are right now, maybe it is not the first things to do because it's very recent and there are more fundamental things to do, but still heritage, this identity, value, these are very important aspects that are at risk, as you are addressing. And I think it is going to be very important in the near future, because our memory is right now very limited, because we are consuming very fast and the triggers are very vast. So thanks for addressing about the critical points as well, so that we can position ourselves in the future. So how do you see, Shama, from your perspective, the future? Any bright light, or are you also sharing the concerns of Sheikh Nawar?
I do agree with Sheikh Nawar regarding the points she raised. I think like the concept of a museum, once a museum is built, this is itself called as a sustainable thing. So a museum is something sustainable. Not balancing between technology and the human and the museum, its collection, it creates that not equal focus on the museum itself. It starts losing the concept or the identity of a museum and its sustainability. So always it's up to the institution to equalize using this and that. But the main thing is to focus on making the museum and its collection as the major thing to focus on. Technology is always something, an add-up to the museum. That's my point of view. And add up to enhance the experiences, but never take the experience itself.
Yeah, if it's not born digital, right? If it's not an immersive art piece, so it is not the originality is not technology bound. So it is actually merely a tool that we can use, we can address. But most of the cultural institutions are very keen on going to the authenticity of the work, of the meaning, and address that in order to really create that learning link. So we have been in collaboration with the learning department on SMA, and I think in our students' minds right now, all these activities related to audience development and digitalization is very crystallized with that learning activity, with in-person interaction, because they might they conducted research on site, they interviewed people. So in that regard, again, a kind of balance between a proposition of update of the app is always coming after the human interaction, after realizing the real problem. So So I think we are approaching maybe another couple of minutes towards our final session, which is going to be wrap up and final remarks. Before that, I would like to ask you if you would like to address any other notions that you skipped during your presentation. Or if you would like to share a word with our, I think, young audience right now as participants or future audience who are going to watch us from recordings. So how are you addressing this challenge of sustainability and values and wellness, and how do you see your role in it? Shehan Nabar?
I wanted to add one, this is kind of different, but there was something I didn't address earlier, but it's sort of what you're saying. I wanted to mention or just maybe remind people about the impact of digital technologies on the environment and the carbon footprint. I think it's something we always forget, but you know, the more and more people are going online, the more you need data centers to create or to support all of these different technologies. There's a lot of waste that comes with it. So yes, things are done quicker and faster and maybe efficiently in a way, but there's a lot of also waste that comes along with electronics, or even just the internet and the physical things that are required to power or run internet grids. And I hope that, you know, there could be a balance, or there could be a solution in the future. And for young audiences, I would say that I would say that they're very lucky I think they're very lucky and to live in a world or grow up with technology and be able to use it so quickly. A lot of people have had to adapt, and it's not always easy. But I think it's important to also always look for the authenticity and the real source of things. There's a lot of criticism now with everything being online and using AI and AR and to create these meaningful experiences, of course, but also there's a question of how authentic is it. There's a question of rights. A lot of artists are now, or institutions are now talking about you know, people have been using apps to create videos or animations from original paintings or older objects. And there's a question of, you know, is that manipulation? Have you changed it now that you've made it, while making it more accessible or making it different, or by trying to do that, we've also manipulated it. So that's just something that I've been thinking about a lot lately. But I think it's always important to, as much as we're using these new technologies, to also appreciate what we have in person and to go off the grid sometimes.
Thank you so much. This is also addressing the intellectual property related issues, ethical issues, not only law related, but in order to trigger creativeness, all that kind of manipulation that we are addressing right now is an important discussion topic. I think we can raise the awareness of young people in that sense as well. Thanks for elaborating on that. So Shama, you would like to add anything in these domains that we have addressed?
I totally agree with Nawar. I wanted to say the same thing. It's always better to go back to the history, to the culture, to the roots, before like getting too much attached to the new technologies that today's youth is addicted to, I can say, because we're not used to that.
This is also going to help in the intergenerational conversation, right? In our conversation with our kids as parents, our students as professors. So in older and younger generations in the community, because our main topic is addressing the community building, and the community is mostly built on trust. So that if we can understand each other, also younger generation, and build trust on that, I think this communication will ease very smoothly and fruitfully. So it was really my pleasure to moderate this session with Sheikha Nawar Al-Qasimi and Shammam Al-Katibi. So I think we have addressed many notions regarding to the previous panels, like mentioning digitalization, AI, ethical issues, trust building, and technical developments, but also the human element that has been mentioned in these panels has been further elaborated in this panel with the balance of human elements, with our concerns about the future, while having the technological openness for all, for participants, people, and institutions. Without further ado, I would like to give the microphone for closing remarks and wrap up to Carla, if she is right now present. And many thanks for hosting me and distinguished experts. Thanks to Sharjah Museum Authority. Thanks to Sharjah Art Foundation for enriching this cultural environment. Over to you, Carla.
Thank you, Dr. Gokce. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed participants and distinguished guests, we have arrived at the end of Sharjah Museums Authority's conference, The Role of Digitalizing Collections in Museums and Cultural Institutions Towards the Sustainable Development of Our Communities, which was organized to celebrate International Museums Day today, May 18th. We encourage all participants to take a couple of minutes to complete a very short evaluation of this conference through clicking on the link in the chat box. The evaluation link will also be sent, will be shared with you via email. Your feedback is highly appreciated. I also wanted to mention that on the occasion of International Museums Day, entrance to all 16 Sharjah museums is free today, May 18th, 2023. We have a very nice selection of workshops and programs being offered to celebrate this occasion, and we would love to see you at our museums. We had, today we had an interesting and an inspiring series of sessions addressing important topics relating to the IMD's theme this year, which is museums, sustainability, and well-being. We were pleased to host leaders and experts in the field today. Professor David Joseph Risley, Professor of Digital Humanities, New York University, Abu Dhabi, Nasra Al-Blushi, Planning and Following Up Officer at the National Library and Archive, and Sheikh Al-Mtairi, Head of the National Culture Section at Jum'a Al-Majid Center. Thank you for taking the time in the session, new platforms and technologies used to digitize collections and foster sustainable practices in museums and cultural institutions, which was moderated by Hazel Ann Page, Collections Management Department Manager at Sharjah Museums Authority. The knowledge and insights shared during this session were truly inspiring. Dr. Zaki Aslan, Director of the International Center for the Study of the Preservation and Restoration of Cultural Property, ICRAM Sharjah, and Fatin Rushdi, Resource Center Unit Head at the Louvre Abu Dhabi, and Samar Tariq Abdurrahim, PMDA Museum. Thank you for your exceptional contribution and for the valuable input you shared with us today. During this session, how are different institutions digitizing and archiving collections of importance to the Arab region, which was moderated by Ali Al-Khayal, who is the curator of Sharjah Archaeology Museum. A truly remarkable session. Sheikha Nawar Al-Qasimi, Vice President of Sharjah Art Foundation, and Shammam Al-Katibi, Marketing and Communication Department Manager at Sharjah Museums Authority. We thank you for sharing your expertise and thoughts with us today during the session, Engaging Audiences Through Digital Platforms, which was moderated by Dr. Gokchi Okandan, Associate Professor of Design Management at the American University of Sharjah. You have left us with invaluable lessons and knowledge to carry forwards. I also want to extend our sincere appreciation to this conference's participants. Thank you for your time and for your engagement. And I hope that the valuable exchange of knowledge and sharing of experience and insights we witnessed today from our speakers and moderators expanded your horizons, deepened your understanding, and helped you gain new perspective. We invite you to join us again in future events organized by Sharjah Museums Authority, and you can visit our website, follow our social media platforms to learn more about the 16 museums managed by SMA, and also to know about our future events, programs, and exhibitions. Our details will be shared in the chat box shortly. And as I mentioned earlier, entrance to all Sharjah museums is free today, May 18th, in celebration of the International Museums Day. We look forward to welcoming you at our museums in person. Thank you for being with us today and have a wonderful rest of the day. See you soon.
شكرا.
Shukran. Thank you.